I froze as Ethan's fists clenched, his eyes burning with rage. "You think you can talk back to me, Nancy?" he hissed. Before I could reply, he lunged toward me. His face twisted in anger when he raised both fists and slammed them into my stomach, sending a shockwave of pain through my already broken body. Gasping for air, I clutched my sides, helpless and confined to the hospital bed. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth as the sound of footsteps rushed toward the door. Would this nightmare ever end? Or was this the moment I would lose everything? "My name is Nancy. I'm 43 years old, a housewife, and the mother of a 7-year-old daughter named Lily. From the outside, my life might seem picture-perfect, married to Ethan, a man who once promised me a lifetime of love and happiness. But appearances can be deceiving. When Ethan and I first met, he was everything I thought I wanted. Confident, attentive, and full of charm, he swept me off my feet effortlessly. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party, and from the moment our eyes locked, I felt a spark I had never known before. Ethan seemed perfect, always knowing the right things to say, the right gestures to make. Within a year, I was wearing his ring and planning a future I believed would be beautiful. I left my steady job at an accounting firm to embrace the life Ethan envisioned, a traditional household where I would focus on family and support his career. At first, it felt like the right decision. Ethan showered me with affection, surprising me with flowers and planning romantic evenings. His promises of a bright future made every sacrifice feel worthwhile. But once the honeymoon phase ended, Ethan's demeanor changed. The man who once adored me became distant and cold. Compliments turned into criticisms, and his thoughtful gestures vanished altogether. Instead of asking how my day had gone, he started pointing out everything I hadn't done to his satisfaction. The spotless home and freshly cooked meals I once enjoyed preparing were now expectations, and anything less was met with his disapproval. Whenever I tried to express my feelings, Ethan would dismiss me outright. "You're a housewife, Nancy," he'd say with a smug grin. "It's not like you have a hard life." His words cut deep, but I swallowed my pain, telling myself that I needed to stay strong for Lily. My daughter deserved a stable home, even if I had to endure Ethan's growing indifference to provide it. Over the years, I realized the man I had fallen in love with was gone. Ethan had become a stranger, one who no longer saw me as a partner, but as someone to command and criticize. What I once believed was a dream had slowly turned into a nightmare, yet I clung to the hope that someday things might change. Ethan's criticism became a constant in my life, a dark cloud hovering over every moment. No matter how much effort I put into keeping the house spotless or making sure dinner was ready when he walked through the door, it was never enough. He always found something to complain about. "You missed a spot on the counter," he'd say as he dropped his bag on the kitchen table. Or, "Why isn't Lily ready for bed yet? What do you even do all day?" His words felt like tiny cuts, slowly eroding my confidence. At first, I tried to reason with him, explaining how much effort I put into managing everything. But my words always fell on deaf ears. "You're just making excuses, Nancy," he'd reply. "You have one job, to take care of this house and our family. Why is that so hard?" Ethan's frequent job changes only made things worse. Each time he came home with news of being let go or quitting, he would blame everyone but himself. His bosses were unfair, his coworkers incompetent. And yet, somehow, he managed to twist these failures into reasons why I was the one letting him down. "You're supposed to make things easier for me," he'd say. "Instead, you're just another problem I have to deal with." I often felt like I was raising two children, Lily and Ethan. While I did everything to make Lily's childhood happy and safe, Ethan's unpredictable moods made it a constant challenge. He would criticize her, too, scolding her for minor things like leaving toys on the floor or talking too loudly. I found myself stepping in, trying to shield her from his harshness. "Don't take that tone with her," I'd say firmly, only for him to turn his anger on me. "Maybe if you taught her some discipline, I wouldn't have to," he'd snap back. As the years passed, I stopped trying to argue. It was exhausting, and I knew it would only escalate. Instead, I focused on Lily, pouring all my energy into giving her a sense of stability and love, even as my own spirit wore thin. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on control. The man I had once admired had become someone I barely recognized, a man whose words and actions left me feeling small and invisible. And yet, I stayed. For Lily, I told myself. For the hope that one day things might get better. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I had just finished grocery shopping. My mind was preoccupied with a long list of tasks waiting for me at home, preparing dinner, checking Lily's homework, and tidying up the kitchen. As I crossed the street with bags in hand, I never saw the car coming. The screech of tires and the blaring of the horn were the last things I heard before everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, my body aching and immobilized. Both of my legs were in casts, and every breath sent sharp pain through my ribs. A nurse stood beside me, explaining that I had been hit by a speeding car. My injuries were severe, and my recovery would take months. In those first few days, I felt utterly helpless. Tasks I had taken for granted, sitting up, eating, even reaching for a glass of water, were impossible without assistance. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, became my lifeline, visiting me daily and taking care of Lily while I was confined to the hospital. They brought me meals, reassured me that Lily was doing fine, and tried to lift my spirits with their constant support. But Ethan was nowhere to be seen. I had expected him to rush to my side the moment he heard about the accident. Instead, there was only silence. Days turned into weeks, and still he didn't come. Each time the door to my hospital room opened, I hoped it would be him, but it never was. When the third week arrived, Ethan finally made an appearance. As he walked into the room, his expression wasn't one of concern or guilt. It was annoyance. He stood at the foot of my bed, arms crossed, and delivered his first words since the accident. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" His words hit me harder than the car that had left me broken in this bed. I stared at him, trying to process the cruelty of what he had just said. How could he blame me for this? How could someone I had given so much to treat me like this? "What do you mean?" Ethan's sharp, cutting words echoed in the sterile hospital room. "Do you have any idea how much of a burden you've become?" he repeated, his tone cold and dismissive. I struggled to sit up, my broken body protesting with every small movement, and looked at him in disbelief. "I didn't ask for this, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "I didn't choose to be hit by a car." He scoffed and moved closer, standing over me like a judge delivering a sentence. "You think that makes a difference? You're lying here doing nothing, and now I'm supposed to handle everything? I can't afford this, Nancy. You need to figure it out." Tears welled up in my eyes as his words cut through me. "Figure it out? I can't even walk, Ethan. What do you expect me to do?" Ethan's expression hardened. "Sell your jewelry," he snapped. "You've got more than enough to cover this mess. I'm not wasting another dime on you." I froze, the shock of his cruelty momentarily silencing me. "You're serious?" I whispered. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? You're my husband, Ethan. You're supposed to support me." "Support you," he barked, his voice rising. "You're useless now, Nancy. I have to carry this family on my back, and you can't even do your part anymore." The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating, as his anger boiled over. I couldn't stay silent any longer. "I've done nothing but support you, Ethan. I gave up my career for you, raised our daughter, and kept our home running while you bounced from one job to another. And now, when I need you most, you call me useless?" His face twisted in rage. "You think you can talk back to me?" he shouted, slamming his fists onto the edge of the bed. "You don't get to make demands." I flinched, but before I could respond, he lunged forward. His fists clenched tightly, and he struck me in the stomach with both hands. Pain shot through my already broken body, leaving me gasping for air. The room spun as I tried to process what had just happened. "What are you?" The pain from Ethan's attack radiated through my body, leaving me gasping and clutching my stomach. Before I could fully process what had happened, the door to my hospital room burst open. A nurse and a security guard rushed in, their faces a mixture of shock and determination. "What's going on here?" the nurse demanded, stepping between me and Ethan. "She provoked me," Ethan shouted defensively, his fists still clenched. "She's ruining my life." The security guard didn't hesitate. "Sir, step back now," he ordered, grabbing Ethan by the arm. Ethan resisted, but the guard tightened his grip. "You need to leave immediately." Ethan turned to me one last time, his face pale with fury. "You'll regret this, Nancy," he hissed. "This isn't over." As the guard escorted him out, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. My body ached, my heart was shattered, but for the first time, I realized I couldn't stay silent any longer. Ethan's cruelty had reached a point of no return. The nurse leaned over me, checking my injuries. "Are you okay?" she asked gently, her voice filled with concern. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded weakly. "Please, just keep him away from me," I whispered. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. My parents, Eleanor and Richard, stepped in completely, ensuring I was never alone. They handled every detail, from caring for Lily to speaking with the hospital administration about filing a formal report against Ethan. Their unwavering support became my anchor in the storm. Physically, I was healing, but the emotional scars ran deeper. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan standing over me, his fists raised in rage. The memory of his attack replayed in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Despite the pain, I knew I had to take action, not just for myself, but for Lily. I began speaking with a lawyer, Amanda, who assured me that Ethan would be held accountable for his actions. "You've been through enough, Nancy," she said firmly. "It's time to fight back." For the first time in years, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to take control of my life. The decision to fight back wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Ethan's violent outburst in the hospital had solidified what I already knew. I couldn't let him continue to control or harm me. For Lily's sake and my own, I had to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. With the support of my parents, I began gathering everything I needed for my case. Amanda, my lawyer, was a sharp and determined woman who quickly became my strongest ally. During our first meeting, she listened intently as I recounted years of Ethan's emotional abuse and the physical attack in the hospital. "You have a strong case, Nancy," Amanda assured me. "Between the hospital staff's testimonies and the medical records documenting your injuries, we can prove his actions beyond any doubt." Hearing those words gave me a renewed sense of purpose. I worked with Amanda to collect evidence, from the nurse's statements to photos of my bruises taken immediately after the incident. My parents also helped compile documentation showing Ethan's neglect and his history of financial irresponsibility. Each piece of evidence painted a clear picture of a man who had spent years tearing me down. The legal process was grueling, but I refused to back down. Ethan, on the other hand, tried to intimidate me from the sidelines. He left voicemails alternating between empty apologies and thinly veiled threats. "You're ruining my life," he said in one. "If you think you can win, you're wrong." I didn't respond to any of his calls. Amanda advised me to remain silent and let the evidence speak for itself. "Don't give him the satisfaction of a reaction," she said. As the court date approached, I threw myself into my recovery. Physical therapy was excruciating, but each small victory, standing up for the first time, taking a single step, reminded me of my strength. Lily's bright laughter and my parents' unwavering support kept me going, even on the hardest days. I wasn't just preparing for a legal battle, I was reclaiming my life. For years, Ethan had stripped me of my confidence and independence. Now, I was determined to show him, and myself, that I was stronger than he ever imagined. The day of the hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination. Dressed in a simple yet confident outfit, I walked into the courtroom with Amanda by my side. My parents sat in the gallery, their reassuring smiles a constant source of strength. Lily, too young to understand the situation, stayed at home with a trusted babysitter. Ethan was already seated at the defense table, his once confident demeanor replaced by visible unease. His lawyer whispered hurriedly in his ear, but his eyes kept darting toward me. The man who had always tried to dominate me now looked like a shadow of himself. Amanda began the case with a clear and precise recounting of Ethan's actions, starting with the assault in the hospital. The nurse and security guard testified, detailing the moment they intervened during Ethan's violent outburst. Their statements were compelling, painting a vivid picture of the attack. Next, Amanda presented the medical records, which documented not only the injuries from the accident, but also the additional bruising caused by Ethan's punches. Photos of my injuries were displayed, and I could feel the weight of the evidence settling in the courtroom. Ethan's lawyer attempted to downplay the incident, calling it a moment of frustration and arguing that Ethan had already apologized. But Amanda wasn't having any of it. She methodically dismantled every excuse, emphasizing Ethan's history of emotional abuse and neglect. "This isn't just about one incident," Amanda said, her voice firm. "This is the culmination of years of cruelty, manipulation, and violence. Nancy has endured enough, and it's time for her to receive justice." When Ethan took the stand, his attempts to shift blame were weak and unconvincing. "She's exaggerating," he stammered. "I've done everything for this family, and she's the one trying to ruin me." Amanda's cross-examination was relentless. She forced Ethan to admit his failures as a husband and father, leaving him visibly shaken. By the time she finished, his defenses had crumbled entirely. After hours of testimony and deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Ethan was found guilty of assault and domestic abuse. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay significant fines, including compensation for my medical expenses. As the gavel struck, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Justice had been served. As the courtroom gavel struck, signaling Ethan's conviction, a wave of relief washed over me. Justice had finally been served. I left the courthouse with my parents by my side, their reassuring presence a constant reminder that I was no longer alone in this fight. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom to build a life where Lily and I could thrive without fear. Within weeks of the verdict, I found a cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't large, but it was everything I needed to create a fresh start for us. Each piece of furniture and every decoration felt symbolic of a life reclaimed. Moving into our new home gave me a renewed sense of purpose, and Lily's laughter echoed through the rooms, filling the space with hope. Determined to provide for her and secure our future, I decided to explore something new. One evening, as Lily and I sat watching videos online, an idea sparked in my mind. What if I shared my story, not just the struggles, but the strength it took to overcome them? With my parents' encouragement, I launched a YouTube channel. I started by posting videos about my journey, surviving an abusive marriage, fighting for justice, and rebuilding a life from scratch. My goal wasn't just to share my experience, but to offer hope to others who might be going through similar struggles. I talked about resilience, self-care, and finding joy in small victories. To my surprise, people began connecting with my content almost immediately. Within a few months, my channel grew rapidly. Viewers left heartfelt comments, sharing their own stories and thanking me for inspiring them. Brands reached out for collaborations, and the income one started generating from my channel far exceeded my expectations. For the first time in years, I felt financially independent. The success of the channel allowed me to not only secure Lily's future, but also pursue dreams I had long buried. I began saving for her education and planning fun trips for us, creating memories I hoped she would cherish forever. Our small apartment became a haven of joy and laughter. Every night, as Lily and I cooked dinner together or sat on the couch watching her favorite shows, I felt immense gratitude for the life we had rebuilt. I was no longer the woman Ethan had tried to break. I was stronger, wiser, and happier. And with Lily by my side, I knew our future was bright. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. If you enjoyed this story and found it inspiring, don't forget to like this video. Your support motivates me to share more stories like this. Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Have you faced challenges like these? Or do you know someone who has? Let's start a conversation. Subscribe to my channel. Don't miss out on more empowering stories life lessons, and tips to navigate tough times. Hit the bell icon to stay updated with every new video. Your support means the world to me. Together, we can build a community of strength, hope, and positivity. Thank you for being a part of this journey. See you in the next video. Hannah, you're nothing to me now, Evelyn declared coldly, standing over me as I lay collapsed, blood dripping from the gash on my head where she shattered the crystal vase. Everything had begun so innocently. When David and I married 5 years ago, we were deeply in love, and I was overjoyed to start our life together. Yet Evelyn had embarked on a twisted mission to create discord between us from the beginning. She was simply jealous, fueled by a deep-seated envy of my youth and beauty. Blinded by his loyalty, David would dismiss her ongoing criticisms and hurtful comments. I should have seen those as warnings of the turmoil ahead. Initially, it was minor criticism about my cooking or how I managed the household. Soon, she began to insinuate more overtly that I was unworthy of David or his wealth. As I endeavored to maintain peace, her remarks grew harsher. "You're nothing but a gold digger. After a free ride," she would hiss during her surprise visits when David wasn't present. "My brother is too good for you." Despite the mounting proof of her manipulation, David remained blind to Evelyn's true nature, seeing her as his flawless older sister whom he could not fault. Whether it was guilt for being the favored child or mere brainwashing, he consistently sided with her. The situation escalated when I found bank statements that revealed Evelyn had been gradually draining money from their inheritance since their parents passed away. Armed with evidence of her deceit, I confronted David, but he exploded, accusing me of meddling in family matters. "How dare you accuse my sister of such a thing?" he bellowed, his face turning beet red. "You're the one with an issue, always trying to find reasons to despise her." It was then that Evelyn took her chance to act like the wronged party while casting me as a villain. Out of nowhere, the vase hit the side of my head, and as I fell to the ground, her figure towered over me with menacing final words. Lying there dazed and struggling to stay conscious while Evelyn gloated over her impending victory, I realized the true nature of my situation. David, the love of my life, just stood by like a coward, unable to confront his manipulative sister. It was then I knew my marriage was unsalvageable, but I was determined not to let that sociopath take everything from me without a fight. I should have recognized the warning signs earlier, but I was too blinded by love and Evelyn's manipulative prowess. "Oh, Hannah, this pot roast is a tad dry, don't you think?" Evelyn would comment with a saccharine smile during her weekly dinner visits, subtly undermining me. "You need to keep an eye on things in the kitchen." David would simply laugh it off, reassuring me, "Evelyn's just teasing, it's all fine, honey." Yet, it was a recurring pattern. She mocked my domestic skills and my appearance, chipping away at my confidence as David's wife. She spent money on anything to belittle me and make me appear inadequate, and David soaked up his sister's toxic words. Gradually, they shifted his loving gaze to one of doubt and disdain. "Don't you think that dress is a bit revealing?" he began to comment when we went out. "My sister's right, you could be a little more modest." The emotional torment only intensified over the years. Evelyn would storm in like a whirlwind, leaving chaos and distress in her wake with each visit. David increasingly sided with her, chiding me for being too sensitive whenever I pointed out her cruelty. "She's my sister, Hannah, blood," he would fume, his 6'3" frame towering over me. "You need to learn to accept her." Meanwhile, Evelyn adopted the role of the victim, batting her eyes innocently whenever I confronted her. "I'm just trying to help, that's all. You're always so defensive for no reason." I felt cornered as if the walls were closing in with no escape. My once adoring husband had turned into Evelyn's accomplice, allowing her to treat me like dirt in my own home. I knew I needed to uncover proof of her truly sinister nature before it was too late. That proof emerged when I found bank statements showing Evelyn had been covertly draining money from the inheritance she shared with David after their parents passed away. I couldn't believe my eyes. This was more than her usual mind games. She was outright stealing from her brother. "Look at this," I implored David desperately, showing him the statements. "Your precious sister has been robbing you blind." His face turned beet red with rage, but not at the betrayal I had uncovered. How dare you snoop through my private financial records? What gives you the right? He exploded. Are you serious? I cried out, feeling as though I had been punched in the gut. She's been taking your money for years, and you're attacking me? That's when Evelyn played her most cunning move, rushing into the room with tears streaming down her face. David, I had no choice, she sobbed, pulling him into an embrace. The medical bills for Mom's cancer treatments, the nursing home fees for Dad. I've been drowning in debt from taking care of them. I didn't want to worry you. Hook, line, and sinker. Just like that, the despicable leech had flipped the narrative, positioning herself as the martyr, making sacrifices for the family. David pulled away from me, disgust on his face. See what you've done, Hannah? How could you put my sister through this after everything she's done for us? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Evelyn just smirked at me, having secured yet another twisted victory. At that moment, I realized I was truly alone in this nightmare, which ignited a reckless determination to bring down my tormentor, no matter what it took. The tension in the house was thicker than fog following Evelyn's latest manipulative stunt. David could barely look me in the eye, still furious over my betrayal of delving into his finances and exposing his precious sister's lies. How could you do this to me, Hannah? He seethed across the dinner table, pushing his plate away. You're accusing Evelyn of stealing from her own family? She sacrificed everything for us. I opened my mouth to protest, but he raised his hand to silence me. Don't. I don't want to hear another word against her. My sister is the only one I can trust. The message was clear. I was now the enemy for daring to challenge Evelyn's false narrative about being overwhelmed with debt from caring for their parents. David had completely bought into her story. I should have realized then that there was no saving our marriage, but a small, delusional part of me still held on to hope. I decided to make one last attempt to reach David and reveal his sister's malevolence. A few nights later, Evelyn arrived for another family dinner, dressed provocatively in a low-cut top, seemingly aimed to provoke me. David and I could barely exchange a few words before she started her usual tirade. Well, if it isn't the little wife trying so hard to maintain appearances, she sneered as I set the table. That shirt looks a bit tight, doesn't it, dear? Trying to catch someone's eye besides my brother's. I felt my cheeks flush with humiliation, but this time I refused to rise to the bait. Hello, Evelyn. Lovely to see you too, I responded, maintaining my composure. She arched a meticulously plucked eyebrow at my calm tone. What? No snide remarks today? Don't tell me you finally learned some class. That's enough, Evelyn. David finally barked, showing some backbone. Leave her alone. I felt a wave of gratitude. He was defending me. But Evelyn just scoffed and shook her head slowly. David, you're too blind to see what a disrespectful, ungrateful shrew she is, always mouthing off. No wonder you can't control her. If I were you, I would have put that little troublemaker in her place a long time ago. That's when chaos erupted. You self-righteous. I exploded, sending a glass of wine crashing to the floor. I should have known you'd never stop with your vicious, toxic behavior. Evelyn recoiled in feigned shock. Why, I never. David, did you hear what she just called me? David's face was thunderous. You watch your mouth, Hannah. That's my sister you're talking to. I rounded on him. Years of anger and resentment boiled over. Are you kidding me right now? She's the one who came in here throwing insults from the moment she walked through the door. Why are you making excuses for her? Because she's my family, he roared, spittle flying from his mouth. Blood is thicker than water, in case you've forgotten. Oh, yes, let's talk about family, I shot back, seeing red. Like how she's been stealing money from your inheritance for years. Or did you just conveniently forget about those bank statements I showed you? Evelyn gasped, putting a delicate hand to her chest. David, you didn't tell me she was still harping on that ridiculous accusation. How dare you continue to spread lies about me? David exclaimed, looking as if he had been slapped. The vein in his neck was bulging as he stepped toward me, fists clenched, and for a terrifying moment, I thought he might strike me. Get out, he said in a low, trembling voice. Get out of my house right now before I do something I'll regret. I stared at him in disbelief as Evelyn smirked behind him. This was it. My marriage was over and she had triumphed, but I didn't leave just yet. You want me out so badly? I shouted, feeling reckless. Fine, I'm gone, but not before everyone knows what a psychopathic, money-grubbing snake your sister is. I stormed out of the house that night, tears of rage and despair burning my eyes. David had made his choice clear. His toxic sister would always come first, no matter how much turmoil she caused me. Where could I even go? I had sacrificed my career, my friends, and my entire life to be David's wife, and now I was out on the street with nothing, all because I had dared to defy his unhinged, beloved Evelyn. There was only one person I could turn to, my best friend, Laura. I broke down sobbing when she opened her door, releasing the torrent of emotions I had suppressed for years. That evil woman has ruined everything, I wailed as Laura ushered me inside. David is so brainwashed, he'll never see her for the manipulative monster she truly is. Laura wrapped me in a tight hug, letting me cry it all out. When I finally regained my composure, she looked me square in the eye with grim determination. Enough is enough, Hannah. You can't let Evelyn walk all over you like this. It's time to fight back. I shook my head despondently against her. You don't know the half of what I've been through. She's got David so wrapped around her finger, he'll never believe a word I say about her true nature. Then we need evidence, Laura stated firmly. Proof that she's the conniving psychopath you say she is. Once we have that, we can bring her down for good. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. The bank statements showing her stealing from their inheritance were just the tip of the iceberg. There had to be more we could find to expose her. Laura nodded grimly. We start digging first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not letting my best friend's life be destroyed by this witch. Over the next few days, Laura and I formulated a plan to infiltrate David's home and gather any information that could take Evelyn down for good. With her working as a realtor, it was easy for Laura to make a copy of the house keys and scope out when David was at work. Keep your eyes peeled for anything suspicious, she instructed as we slipped into the house. Emails, letters, documents, it all could be the key to exposing her. I rifled through David's office with trembling hands, my heart pounding. If Evelyn found out what we were doing, the thought of the repercussions made me shudder. But then a hidden file caught my attention. It contained bank statements and legal papers from several years back. As I flipped through the pages, I felt the blood drain from my face. Laura, you need to see this, I said, my voice trembling. The documents confirmed my worst fears. Evelyn had been under investigation for allegedly attempting to murder her husband years earlier. There were witness statements claiming she had been draining his accounts and pressuring him to alter his will. Then he had mysteriously died in a suspicious car crash, with the police unable to establish foul play. Evelyn had inherited everything, and the case had gone cold. I broke down sobbing when she opened her door, releasing the torrent of emotions I had suppressed for years. That evil woman has ruined everything, I wailed as Laura ushered me inside. David is so brainwashed, he'll never see her for the manipulative monster she truly is. Laura wrapped me in a tight hug, letting me cry it all out. When I finally regained my composure, she looked me square in the eye with grim determination. Enough is enough, Hannah. You can't let Evelyn walk all over you like this. It's time to fight back. I shook my head despondently against her. You don't know the half of what I've been through. She's got David so wrapped around her finger, he'll never believe a word I say about her true nature. Then we need evidence, Laura stated firmly. Proof that she's the conniving psychopath you say she is. Once we have that, we can bring her down for good. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. The bank statements showing her stealing from their inheritance were just the tip of the iceberg. There had to be more we could find to expose her. Laura nodded grimly. We start digging first thing tomorrow morning. I'm not letting my best friend's life be destroyed by this witch. Over the next few days, Laura and I formulated a plan to infiltrate David's home and gather any information that could take Evelyn down for good. With her working as a realtor, it was easy for Laura to make a copy of the house keys and scope out when David was at work. Keep your eyes peeled for anything suspicious, she instructed as we slipped into the house. Emails, letters, documents, it all could be the key to exposing her. I rifled through David's office with trembling hands, my heart pounding. If Evelyn found out what we were doing, the thought of the repercussions made me shudder. But then a hidden file caught my attention. It contained bank statements and legal papers from several years back. As I flipped through the pages, I felt the blood drain from my face. "Laura, you need to see this," I said, my voice trembling. The documents confirmed my worst fears. Evelyn had been under investigation for allegedly attempting to murder her husband years earlier. There were witness statements claiming she had been draining his accounts and pressuring him to alter his will. Then he had mysteriously died in a suspicious car crash, with the police unable to establish foul play. Evelyn had inherited everything, and the case had gone cold. "Oh, my God," Laura gasped, covering her mouth. "Are you saying this lunatic killed her husband for his money?" I nodded slowly, feeling numb. "And she's been trying to do the same to David. That's why she's so determined to turn him against me. I'm the only thing standing in the way of her getting to my husband's inheritance." Laura's gaze turned steely. "We have all we need now. It's time to make her pay for her crimes, once and for all." A dark resolve washed over me, dispelling the fear and doubt. Evelyn's reign of terror was about to collapse around her, and this time there would be no playing the victim. The evidence of Evelyn's murderous past silenced me. This went beyond her typical schemes and manipulations. She was a genuine psychopath who had likely killed for money before. "We need to take this to the police immediately," Laura declared, her face pale. "Who knows what that maniac is capable of if she's already gotten away with murder?" I nodded, still in shock from the discovery. Part of me had always suspected Evelyn was deranged, but having proof that she was an actual murderer escalated the situation to a horrifying new level. "You don't understand," I said, feeling hollow. "David will never believe any of this, no matter what we show him. He's too deeply under her spell." Laura's jaw set firmly. "Then we ensure she's brought to justice with or without his help. This has gone far enough. It's time for her to face some serious consequences." Over the next few days, we reviewed the files, compiling an irrefutable case to present to the authorities. Bank statements, witness accounts, and even phone records indicated that Evelyn's husband had been trying to escape her grip in the months before his tragic accident. Everything was falling into place, revealing the truth. The most chilling detail was the photos from the crime scene: a wrecked car in a ditch, the body removed and enclosed in a black bag beside the road. I had to look away, sickened by the realization that Evelyn could have orchestrated such a gruesome demise just to claim her husband's fortune. "You know she's planning to do the same to David once I'm out of the picture," I murmured to Laura, my voice shaking. "First, it was his inheritance from their parents, and now she wants everything: the house, the cars, the entire lifestyle I built with him. She'll stop at nothing." Laura looked at me with determination. "Not if we stop her first. We've got everything we need to put this monster away for the rest of her life, where she can't hurt anyone else." The next day, we took the file to the police precinct and requested to meet with a detective. I could barely speak as I handed over the evidence, detailing Evelyn's escalating campaign of abuse and violence against me. The grizzled cop flipped through the documents, his eyes widening. "You're telling me this woman got away with murdering her husband for his money years ago, and now she's trying to do the same thing to her brother?" he asked, his tone incredulous. I nodded miserably. "David is under her total control. She's completely brainwashed him into taking her side over me, no matter what horrible thing she does. If you don't stop her reign of terror, I'm afraid of what she's capable of." The detective's jaw tightened grimly. "Don't worry, ma'am. We've got more than enough here to lock this Evelyn up and throw away the key. Trying to kill her flesh and blood for inheritance money? That's a new low, even for my line of work." He paused, seeming to study me closely. "I've got to ask, how did you manage to get all this evidence on her? This is one hell of a case file you've put together." I felt a rush of adrenaline as the weight of everything came crashing down. This was it, the beginning of the end of Evelyn's twisted reign. No more games, no more manipulation or fake tears, just cold, hard consequences for her unforgivable actions. "Let's just say I've had a lot of practice seeing through that snake's lies," I replied tightly. "It's time she finally paid for what she's done to my family." As they led me out, I could have sworn I saw the cop give me the faintest of nods, a look of respect on his weathered face. At that moment, I realized I had been underestimated as a mere victim for far too long. Now, the merciless former predator was about to become the prey, and this time I would be the one showing no mercy. I should have known Evelyn wouldn't go down without one final vicious fight. The day after Laura and I took our damning evidence to the police, the demon herself was waiting when I returned to my friend's apartment. Well, if it isn't the ungrateful little schemer, she sneered as I froze in the doorway. Evelyn rose from the couch, hands on her hips and eyes glittering with malice. I knew you were plotting something behind my back. My heart pounded, but I refused to show fear. Get out of here, Evelyn. It's over. The police know everything about what you did. Rather than looking scared, she threw back her head and laughed, a cold, cruel sound that made my blood run cold. You stupid girl, she hissed. Did you think a few measly documents would be enough to take me down? In that terrible moment, before I could even blink, Evelyn lunged. She snatched a heavy crystal vase from the end table, raising it high like a weapon. This is what you get for meddling, she shrieked. Then, with sickening force, the vase crashed down on my head. Pain exploded, blinding and brutal, and darkness swallowed me whole. I slumped to the floor, a lifeless heap, warm blood oozing from the wound. Evelyn loomed over me, her face contorted in rage. You're dead. Do you hear me? She snarled, spittle flying. This is my home now, my life. I'll make David see you for what you are, a liar and a spiteful shrew. I tried to speak, to fight back, but unconsciousness claimed me. The last thing I saw was David bursting through the doorway, his face a mask of horror. Evelyn, what have you done? He cried. Then oblivion. I drifted in and out of consciousness, snippets of voices and movement reaching me through a haze. At one point, I swore I heard sirens wailing in the distance. Finally, I awoke in a hospital bed. Laura sat beside me, her face etched with worry. My head throbbed with a white-hot agony, and thick bandages swaddled my skull. Oh, Hannah, thank goodness you're awake, Laura whispered, squeezing my hand. I thought I'd lost you. Memories flitted back. Evelyn's twisted grin, the shattering vase, the searing pain, the blood. She tried to kill me. I rasped a hoarse croak. Where is she? Did they arrest her? Laura looked away, her expression troubled. The police took her in, but Hannah, you won't believe it. David refused to press charges. He claims it was a misunderstanding, that you two were arguing over him. Fury surged through me, momentarily pushing aside the pain, ignoring the throbbing in my head. I ripped the 4 from my arm and tried to rise. That spineless coward. I growled. After what she did, he's still defending her? Laura gently pressed a hand on my shoulder. Hannah, you need to rest. Calm down. I wanted to scream, to unleash my rage, but a cold reality washed over me. My husband was so blinded by Evelyn's lies that he let her attack me and then defend her actions. Our marriage was shattered beyond repair. You're right, I conceded, sinking back against the pillows. It's over. David's too far gone. He'll never see her for the monster she truly is. But even as I spoke those words, a strange sense of peace settled over me. At that moment, I understood my fight wasn't with David anymore. It was with Evelyn, the venomous snake herself. And this time, consumed by a relentless desire for justice, I knew I wouldn't rest until Evelyn faced the consequences of her actions. The games were over. Tears and pleas for David to see sense wouldn't work. It was time to strike a decisive blow before his deranged sister inflicted further destruction on innocent lives. Turning to Laura, my eyes hardened with resolve. We need to leave. I have a plan to ensure Evelyn never hurts another soul. Are you in? Without hesitation, Laura offered a determined nod. Absolutely. Let's finally make that psycho pay for her crimes. An eerie silence descended upon the hospital room as David entered, his face a mask of uncertainty. My body tensed, and I instinctively grasped Laura's hand, seeking support. What brings you here? I asked flatly, unable to mask the bitterness in my voice. More excuses for your deranged sister, though? Flinching lightly at my tone, David didn't take the bait. Instead, he slumped heavily into a chair, weariness etched on his face. Hannah, I don't know where to begin, he admitted quietly. What Evelyn did, trying to kill you in cold blood, it's... His voice trailed off, his head shaking slowly. Despite the gravity of his words, I felt no sense of vindication, only a weary resignation and simmering anger. Save it, I interrupted coldly. Your sister's a psychopathic murderer, and on some level, you knew it all along. You simply chose to ignore the ugly truth because she was blood. Before David could protest, years of pent-up resentment bubbled over. Don't even try to deny it. I showed you proof of her stealing your inheritance, manipulating you against me, even those files exposing her as her own husband's killer for money. But you couldn't be bothered to face the truth. A soft admission, almost inaudible, you're right, escaped David's lips. His shoulders slumped in defeat. Right, Hannah. I've been so deep in denial about Evelyn that I let her control my life. I let her abuse you, manipulate me, and turn me against my wife. He looked up, his eyes haunted by regret that would forever torment him. You never deserved any of that hell. I was simply too blind and weak to resist her twisted games. White-hot anger flared in my chest, and I struggled to maintain composure. So what now? I asked, my voice shaking. Am I supposed to forgive and forget? Let you off the hook because you finally recognized your sister for the monster she is? David shook his head slowly. No, forgiveness and another chance? I don't deserve either, not after what I allowed to happen under my roof. The pronouncement hung heavy in the air. It was over between us. The blow, though expected, landed with the force of a physical attack. Despite my resignation to the broken state of our marriage, a delusional sliver of hope had clung to me, a fantasy that David would seek amends after Evelyn's wickedness was exposed. I'm filing for divorce immediately, he continued, his gaze fixed elsewhere. And I won't contest anything. The house, the assets, it's all yours. Evelyn's poisonous touch stole the best thing I ever had, and this meager offering is the least I can do. Words failed me. A part of me yearned to unleash a torrent of anger, to hurl accusations at this shell of the man I loved, but a deeper emptiness prevailed, devoid of the catharsis I craved from his surrender. Laura's voice, laced with contempt, broke the silence. So that's it? You just slink away, leaving your deranged sister to rot in jail? Typical. I wish there was more I could say or do. David raised his shoulders and slumped. But we both know there's no coming back from what I allowed to happen. You deserve so much better, Hannah. With that, he rose and shuffled towards the door, pausing at the threshold. He cast one final glance back. For what it's worth, I am sorry, truly sorry for everything. Then he was gone, leaving me amidst the wreckage of our life. Tears streamed down my face as Laura engulfed me in a hug, a dam bursting and releasing the tidal wave of anger, pain, and heartbreak I'd bottled up for so long. My marriage was over, my husband lost to Evelyn's toxic influence. Yet, amidst the mourning, a strange sense of freedom and resolve bloomed. David might have been too weak to stand up to his twisted sister, but I wouldn't be. Evelyn's reign of terror would end, one way or another. In the days that followed David's departure, I stood at a crossroads. One path led to despair, a descent into the ashes of my failed marriage, consumed by the trauma and betrayal. The other blazed with an icy determination to set things right. Soon, I declared, my voice hardening with conviction. We can't let Evelyn just get away with this. She tried to kill me, her sister-in-law. That kind of depravity can't go unanswered. Laura met my gaze with a grim nod. You're right. For too long, that psycho has slithered away from consequences. It's time the law catches up with her once and for all. With renewed purpose, we embarked on a mission, compiling every shred of evidence to ensure justice would be served. Our case against Evelyn was ironclad. We had financial documents, witness statements, and a meticulous paper trail chronicling her decades-long web of greed, manipulation, and likely murder. This should be enough to bury that viper for good. Laura eyed the hefty file with grim satisfaction. No more crocodile tears getting her out of this one, she muttered. A surge of adrenaline pulsed through me, my heart hammering. This was it, the first step to ensure Evelyn could never hurt another innocent person as she almost did to me. I was finally reclaiming my power, wresting it back from her toxic grip. We marched straight to the downtown police precinct, requesting a detective. A seasoned officer in a rumpled suit eventually ushered us into an interview room. His eyes narrowed as he skimmed through the damning evidence. "You're telling me this Evelyn has been swindling and manipulating her own family for years?" he inquired slowly. "Possibly even killed her first husband?" I met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "That's correct, detective." "And her latest act?" "Attempting to murder me, her sister-in-law, by bashing my skull in. She's a ruthless psychopath who will stop at nothing." The cop's jaw clenched tight as he studied the crime scene photos, the undeniable evidence of Evelyn's brutal attack. "I've seen a lot of scum in my days," he conceded, "but this is a whole new level of depravity." He slammed the file shut and fixed me with an intense stare. "Miss Lawson, let me assure you, we're taking this case very seriously. With the mountain of evidence you've provided, we're confident we can put this woman away for a long, long time." A weight lifted off my shoulders, followed by a wave of elated relief. After years of gaslighting and torment, my voice was finally heard, and my claims about Evelyn's cruelty were believed. "Thank you, detective," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "You have no idea what it means to know the law won't allow her evil to go unpunished this time." The cop offered a curt smile. "No need for thanks, ma'am. We're just doing our job, taking a dangerous predator off the streets. You're the one who showed true courage by confronting Evelyn's abuse and refusing to back down." Leaving the precinct with Laura, a wave of peace and resolution washed over me. Despite the challenges ahead, Evelyn's reign of terror would finally face justice, no matter how much she cried wolf. In that moment, I realized my bitter struggle had forged a strength I never knew I possessed. The once meek and tormented wife was no more. I was a survivor, rising from the ashes of Evelyn's twisted games, ready to fight another day. And this time, I would be victorious, while she reaped the bitter consequences of her actions so richly deserved. As days passed after my release from the hospital, I felt the weight of years of emotional and physical abuse slowly lifting. Evelyn was out of my life, though not yet behind bars. Laura and I had done everything we could to gather evidence, and now it was up to the legal system to bring her down. But I wasn't waiting around anymore. I had a life to rebuild. David and I finalized the divorce quietly. He moved out of the house almost immediately, unable to bear the constant reminder of the havoc his sister had wrought on our marriage. Despite everything, I felt no anger toward him anymore, only pity. He was a broken man, a victim of his sister's manipulations, but that didn't excuse his choices. His loyalty to Evelyn had cost him his marriage, his home, and his happiness. The house was mine now, a hollow victory I hadn't expected to feel so bittersweet. I sold it within weeks, not wanting to stay in the place where I had been so humiliated and hurt. The money I got from the sale was enough to start over, far away from the city where my old life had crumbled. Meanwhile, Evelyn faced her reckoning. The police investigation, combined with the evidence Laura and I had provided, was enough to build a strong case. With witness statements from her first husband's friends and financial records showing her embezzlement and attempted fraud, the authorities reopened the investigation into her husband's mysterious death. On the day of Evelyn's arrest, I got a call from the detective handling the case. "It's over, Miss Lawson," he said with a grim satisfaction in his voice. "We've got her. Evelyn won't be hurting anyone else." Relief washed over me, but it wasn't triumph that I felt, it was closure. After years of torment, I was finally free from Evelyn's web of lies and cruelty. Evelyn's trial was set for the following year. She faced charges of embezzlement, assault, and fraud, along with a reopened investigation into her husband's suspicious death. Though she denied everything at first, the mounting evidence was undeniable. Her facade of innocence finally shattered in court when a former acquaintance of her late husband testified, providing damning evidence that Evelyn had pressured her husband to change his will shortly before his death. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The media covered the story widely, calling her a black widow who preyed on family members for financial gain. While Evelyn might have believed she could manipulate her way out of anything, this time there was no escaping justice. As for David, I never saw him again after our divorce was finalized. He left the city, possibly to escape the shame of what had happened. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had checked into a rehabilitation program for emotional trauma. He'd lost everything: his wife, his home, and his sister, whom he had defended at the expense of his happiness. I didn't harbor hatred for him anymore. I had loved him once, and though his weakness had led to our downfall, I hoped that someday he could find peace, just as I was beginning to find mine. Laura and I moved forward, stronger than ever. We both decided to leave the city, starting fresh in a small town where I found a job that reignited my passion, working as a consultant for victims of domestic abuse. My experiences have given me insight into the dangerous, often unseen emotional manipulation that people like Evelyn could inflict on others. It became my mission to help those who felt powerless, like I once had, to regain their sense of self-worth and control over their lives. I rebuilt my life, one step at a time, surrounded by supportive people who lifted me. The house, the money, the things I had once clung to as symbols of stability, they didn't matter anymore. I had something far more valuable: my freedom, my peace, and the strength to never let anyone tear me down again. Evelyn had been a dark force in my life, but in the end, she was defeated, not just by the legal system, but by my refusal to give in to her cruelty. I had won, not through violence or revenge, but through resilience, patience, and a refusal to let her break me. And that, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.
Hey there, my name's Claire, and I'm 34. This is the story of how I got revenge on my evil mother-in-law, who was hell-bent on trying to ruin my life. For a long time, I held my tongue and turned the other way, but everyone has their breaking point. I believe I reached mine some months ago. To give you some context, you should know that whenever it came to my mother-in-law giving me something, it was always of poor, subpar quality. For example, on our wedding day, this gift is from my beautiful mother-in-law Justine. Let me open it up. Oh, I see it's a second-hand spatula. Thank you so much, this is very lovely. Or when it was my 33rd birthday. Oh, Justine, you really shouldn't have. Sure, just open it. Oh wow, it's a... What is it? You silly goose, it's a shovel. Oh, how lovely, but there appears to be some rust on it. It's a refurbished shovel. I later found out that she took it from the neighbor's shed and gifted it to me. There was also that time I held a dinner party, and she bought the cheapest bottle of wine she could find. At this rate, I'd rather she didn't do anything for me at all. But the instances that irk me the most, the moments that hurt and bruise my soul, are when she insists on cooking food for me. Every time I try it, it tastes horrendous. At first, I was very forgiving and sympathetic, because some people just can't cook all that well, which is fine. I thought that since it was coming from a genuine place of wanting to cook for someone you love, it didn't matter how it tasted but the thought behind it. I later found out that the same dishes prepared by her for different people tasted absolutely spectacular. After trying and failing to gaslight myself for some time, I concluded that she was simply sabotaging my food. Go on, Claire, try my casserole. I made it. I'm a bit stuffed from all the food you've given me. Okay then, but at least eat just a bite for me. I reluctantly took a bite, my stomach already bubbling from what was about to come. I ate some of the casserole, and just as I suspected, it was horrendous. If I didn't know any better, I'd say she was trying to poison me. You might be wondering what my husband thought throughout all of this. He, of course, didn't believe me. I didn't blame him either. It's hard to accept such an outlandish statement, especially when it comes to your mother. I would constantly beg and plead with him to try the food she prepared for me, but he would always brush me off, telling me that I'm crazy. There would be other moments in which my husband would be willing to try my food to make sure what I'm saying is true, but he would always be stopped by Justine. Hey, that food is for Claire. I made it extra special for her. You know her dietary requirements? Yes, I indeed had certain dietary requirements. I'm a vegetarian, and I married into a family that practically enjoys their beef and pork still mooing and oinking on the plate. Needless to say, they are avid meat lovers. Whenever there were large family gatherings, Justine would be subjected to making a modified plate for me, which I always appreciated. However, I couldn't help but feel like zero effort was being put into my dishes. After realizing that Justine was sabotaging my food, I tried to sympathize with her. I thought that perhaps she simply resented me for making her go the extra mile in preparing a separate dish for me. I could see how that might annoy someone, but it didn't explain her giving me trashy and awful gifts every time she could. Nonetheless, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. That is, until a few months ago, when I invited a coworker of mine to one of the family cookouts. It should be noted that my coworker, like me, is also a vegetarian. This would have been a good indicator to see whether my mother-in-law was actively being malicious or if she just couldn't cook a decent vegetarian meal to save her life. To my surprise, it turns out that she made 2 special vegetarian dishes, one for my coworker and one for me. Why she couldn't just make one big vegetarian dish for both of us to share, I didn't know. Well, I did know. Eventually, I found out that Justine could cook. I sneakily tasted my coworker's dish without Justine's knowledge, and it was very tasty. It was one of the best vegetarian dishes I'd ever tasted, even better than what I normally cook for myself. My dish, on the other hand, tasted completely dreadful. There were several moments when I had to stop myself from gagging at the dinner table because of how putrid it was. Later that night, when we all went to our respective homes, I approached my husband, Liam, about it again. "Oh hush, Claire, you're being dramatic and frankly a little bit rude. I swear on everything, babe, she's sabotaging my food. She doesn't want to prepare good food for me." Well, even if the food is poor quality, which I highly doubt, what do you expect from her? She's just one woman. If you want, you should try and help her in the kitchen while she's cooking. Maybe she doesn't know how to cook vegetarian food. See, the thing is, I've offered on many occasions to help her in the kitchen, but then she gets defensive and starts accusing me of hating her food, which I do. Also, when I try to make suggestions, she gets even more offended. There's no winning with this woman. Maybe you should just bring your own container of food to the gatherings then, Liam suggested. And risk being perceived as rude by the whole family? I mean, what sort of guest does that? It's not like I have celiac disease or some other food allergy that requires me to accommodate myself. I'm simply a vegetarian. Everyone can prepare vegetarian food, so if I bring my own, people will think I'm rude. Also, remember my coworker Lucy? She was lovely. Yeah, well, guess what? The food was also lovely. You know, her vegetarian food. Liam paused to truly contemplate what was going on. He sat down on the bed and pondered some more. Well, say something. Okay, you're my wife and you know that I love you. I want to believe you, but I think this is all just in your head. I get that my mother can be a bit unique with her gift-giving abilities, but going as far as to sabotage your food? That's really low and dangerous too. Right, exactly. This one time, I swear to God, I smelled bleach in my food. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom for the remainder of the dinner party to avoid eating it. Claire, I think that because you two are not on the best of terms, you see her in a different light than most of us do. My mother is a great chef. I don't disagree. In fact, after tasting some of my coworkers' food tonight, I'm convinced she can do a splendid job. But for some reason, when it comes to me, she doesn't want to cook properly. Enough! I won't hear you slander my mother any longer. She's an amazing cook. You're being delusional. I was fed up. How many times did I need to try and convince my husband that I was telling the truth? I decided that I had to show him what I was saying was correct. So, I patiently waited for the next family gathering to ensue so that I could make my move. It was approximately a month later when I got a call from my mother-in-law. "Claire, darling, how are you?" "I'm doing well, thank you." "And you?" "I'm excited. As you know, we're holding another family gathering this weekend. Uncle JJ just returned from his job posting in France, and now we have to celebrate. Please tell me that you and Liam can make it." "Oh, Justine, you know we wouldn't miss it for the world." "Oh, wonderful." Uncle JJ didn't want anything fancy despite coming from France, you can imagine. So, we're just going to have things like sliders and sandwiches, very casual. You can even invite your coworker friend again. She was darling. Unfortunately, she won't be able to make it this time around, but Liam and I will be there. Oh, what a shame, but I'm glad you two will be coming. Oh, and one more thing before I forget. I have decided to buy you some special plates so that it will be easier for me to distinguish between vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes. They're very beautiful and navy blue. You'll love them. Not an issue, Justine. Thank you for being so gracious. Alrighty then, see you soon. I hung up the phone. In any other circumstance, I wouldn't have minded having different plates from everyone else. It's just a plate, after all. But considering what I knew about her sabotaging me, I knew that having different plates was just another way of her trying to alienate me from everyone else.
Everyone else in the family enjoys their meal thoroughly, but mine are always lousy and pathetic. So when I complain, I look snobbish and uptight. But that is not the case.
I know that rumors have been going around of me being bratty, and I wish I could just share my food with them so they could see that what I'm being served is not right. But Justine is always watching like a hawk, and for some reason, she gets extremely upset and offended when I try to offer my food to someone to taste or when I don't finish my food. Thankfully, there have been times when I managed to escape, but unfortunately, more often than not, I'd have to chug the food down as quickly as I could just to avoid tasting what I was putting in my stomach. Whenever I come over, I dread it, and I always anticipate going home, scrubbing my mouth clean, and making some proper food for myself.
But this upcoming weekend, I wasn't feeling that dread.
On the contrary, I was rather excited because I had a plan to show everyone once and for all that I wasn't crazy, rude, or dramatic.
I had genuine concerns that weren't being met, and everyone needed to see that. The weekend came, and as usual, Liam and I brought our signature coleslaw to the barbecue. There were steaks, sausages, and chickens everywhere.
As a vegetarian, it was slightly overwhelming to be surrounded by so much meat, even though I was used to it by now. It seemed as though Justine went all out this time for Uncle JJ's return because even the meat lovers were saying, "This is way too much meat."
Nonetheless, the party was great.
I was beginning to enjoy myself, chatting trivially with some in-laws and playing with my nieces and nephews.
But the time finally came when Justine called for everyone to come and sit at the big dining table set up outside.
When she called for us, my stomach began to rumble with that all-too-familiar feeling of dread and disgust.
But I quelled it, forcing myself to smile and sit calmly and happily next to Liam. "You see, Claire, everyone's having a good time. Hell, I even saw you enjoying yourself. Just relax and let loose.
Mom worked hard on this, and I'm sure your food would taste good if you just adopted a more positive attitude." At this point, I was getting sick of hearing Liam preach from his high horse, having no idea what it was like dealing with his mother and being forced to eat the dreadful food.
But I had a plan that was about to go down.
Justine proceeded to bring out the food with the help of the older children, who loved bringing out the dishes.
Justine herself brought out mine and Liam's plates, and just as she had said on the phone, mine was on a special navy blue plate. My plate was a beautiful navy blue. Unfortunately, this was a stark contrast against the other white plates that were all around the table. But that didn't matter to me at the moment, as I was ready to enact my revenge.
Just as everyone was settled down at the table and grace had been said, people were ready to eat when I suddenly cried out, "Oh my goodness, is that a snake?"
Everyone was startled in their seats.
The children began to squeal in excitement as they were all rushed inside, with some of them fighting back, eager to see the snake. The adults all sprang into action, with the women leading the elderly and the children away, and the men going towards where I pointed, being extra cautious but manly and burly nonetheless to protect their family from this unforeseen danger. While everyone was tending to their designated roles, I trailed behind the women, looking back at the dinner table all set out with delicious and beautifully prepared food. All of the food looked pretty similar, and one really couldn't tell the difference between plate A and plate B if they tried, which is why my mother-in-law made her special plate for me, so that she could easily tell which plate had the nasty food and which food was good.
I hurried because I started to notice people making their way back from the forest. Brushing up ahead, I snatched the sandwiches from my plate and Liam's plate and swapped them fast so that I wouldn't be detected.
At that moment, Justine was re-emerging from the house, as she got word on the phone from Liam that it was a false alarm and that if there was a snake, it was long gone by now. Everyone began to return to their seats, all slightly giddy and excited from the discovery, even if it was a false one. People seemed to enjoy the rush of adrenaline they got from the situation, even the elders. Everyone resituated themselves in their seats, and I said, "My bad, everyone.
I must have not seen the ground properly.
Please excuse the disturbance."
Everyone responded quite well to the disturbance, not being too irritated with having their eating time disturbed by a false alarm. "It's no issue, honey. Better safe than sorry." And everyone seemed to have enjoyed the little thrill of being greeted by a snake. "Perhaps it smelled all the meat and decided to join in," someone joked. Everyone laughed. It was indeed a good party. That was until Liam decided to take a bite of his vegetarian sandwich. "It's crazy, actually," he began, taking a bite.
"We were looking so frantically for that darn snake, but he stopped dead in his tracks, and all eyes were on him since he was the one telling the story.
He began to gag, spitting out his sandwich on the plate.
Yuck, that is horrendous.
Liam, how dare you say something so rude?
I worked so hard on these meals, Justine scolded.
Everyone began to slowly eat their food, admiring the succulent and juicy tastes they were experiencing. They subsequently started questioning Liam and his reaction to the food. Uncle JJ, who was the quiet one of the bunch, even remarked how it tasted fine to him.
I don't know you all.
My food just tasted weird for a second. Sorry, Mom, I didn't mean to be rude. It's just I've never tasted that before. My bad, maybe it's a new recipe.
Let me try again.
Again, Liam tried to take a bite of the sandwich, but he was gagging before it was fully in his mouth. At this point, Justine was quite flustered, and she huffed and puffed about how rude Liam was being. Mom, I'm sorry, but I can't eat that. I don't know what's wrong with me, but maybe it isn't me. Maybe this sandwich is just off.
Nonsense.
My food is never off. Justine snapped. Except it is, I interjected. Everyone turned to me, wondering how I could say such a thing. It was only at this point that Liam realized that I hadn't been eating my food. Babe, why aren't you eating? Because I can't eat it.
It has meat in it.
The table shared confused looks, and I saw the realization in Liam's eyes. Mom, have you been sabotaging Claire's food? Liam's question hung heavy in the air, and everyone gasped almost in unison. Justine began to start shouting, Liam, I don't know what's gotten into you. Maybe it's your spoiled and rotten wife who has convinced you to do this, but I will not have it. Do you hear me? Apologize this instant. No, Mom, it's your food that is spoiled and rotten.
Claire was right all along.
Liam's voice was firm, his eyes locked with his mother's. You guys, here, Uncle JJ, taste this. Liam handed over his sandwich to Uncle JJ, who tried to take a bite but had to stop himself from throwing up all over the table. At that moment, Justine's eyes snapped to me, and she said with venom in her words, What have you done? I should be asking you what you've done. You're the one who's been sabotaging my meals so that every time I come here, I'm in despair. Attention, everybody. I have to come clean. I made a false report about the snake. Yes, I'm so sorry for lying to you all, but I needed a distraction. You see, ever since I became part of this family, Justine has been sabotaging and poisoning my food. The revelation sent shockwaves through the gathered relatives. It's true. I have had my suspicions for a long time, and you all might have thought that I was being snobbish, but just taste the sandwich that Justine made for me, if you can even stomach it. By the time I finished my sentence, the sandwich had already made a couple of rotations amongst the men and women. After they had their reactions of gagging and dry heaving, they recommended that the elderly and the children needn't partake due to how rancid the food smelled, with even one family member wanting to go to the hospital. Your move, Justine, I said calmly. All right, fine. You caught me. I was sabotaging your food, as you claim. Why on earth would you do that? Liam's voice trembled with disbelief. Because she hates me. She's always had it out for me since day one. At that moment, Liam began to look green. He bent over and began vomiting all over the grass. After he was done, he flopped down on the patio sofa. Mom, what did you put in that sandwich? Liam, are you okay? I rushed to his side, concern flooding my voice. This sandwich wasn't meant for you, Liam. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone. Please forgive me. Justine's voice wavered with regret and guilt as she realized the extent of her actions. Uncle JJ's homecoming had to be cut short as several family members had to escort Liam to the hospital. It turns out that putting rancid mushrooms with a hint of cat feces does not sit well in the human body. Liam was hospitalized for some time as he recovered from this food poisoning, and my mother-in-law was consequently jailed for her part in this, after giving her full confession. The events of that day made me realize that this lady was willing to kill me due to her unbridled hatred of me. Had it been me, she would have been lollygagging until sunset. But because it was her son, she was doing everything in her power to rectify her mistake. But it was too late, the damage had already been done. Thankfully, my husband made a full recovery, and all the while I would visit him in the hospital, he would apologize profusely for not believing me when I said that his mother would sabotage my food. His mother was trying to post bail, but the other family members wouldn't allow it, saying that she needed to sit there for some time and think about what she'd done. People who went to visit her always informed me of how sorry she was, and that seeing her son in such distress made her realize her erroneous ways. I, for one,
am not accepting such an apology because it took her seeing her son in pain for her to realize that what she was doing was wrong. You mean to tell me that for all these years, not once did she stop and think that she was being evil? Lord knows what else she's been putting in my food, and I've had to stomach it for the longest time, often vomiting in secret and missing days of work just to nurse myself back to health. After revealing all of this to my husband, he felt even more sorry for me and promised to always believe me from now on. I'm just glad that I managed to teach 2 lessons. 1, always listen to your wife, and 2, don't mess with me because you might end up in jail. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.
I'm staying over tonight, she announced, to accommodate us. Excuse me, come on, I told you before, I'm watching a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late in the evening, I said we'd all be staying here during her son's absence. The mother-in-law arrived unannounced, with 7 friends in tow. Having not been informed and already having plans of my own, I tried to decline. But you'll be back soon, right? We'll just drop our stuff and head out for a while. Can you prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for us? She seemed to disregard my situation and proceeded as if everything was settled. What's more, I recognized the necklace shimmering around her neck. I had endured the mother-in-law's brazen behavior without confrontation for so long, but I finally reached my limit. I can't, I have a trip planned starting now. What a trip! Who are you going with? The usually non-confrontational me, responding with a no, surprised her. Having had enough of her excessive harassment, I finally drew the line. Please give me back that necklace. It was time for the mother-in-law to face consequences for her actions. My name is Mary Gorman, a 30-year-old housewife. After getting married, I used my administrative experience to work as a computer class instructor. My husband, Mike, serves as the president of a subsidiary that his father owned, and he seems busy every day, though he sometimes looks deep in thought. I'm relieved to see you relaxed, especially when we go on our favorite movie dates, he'd say. I feel lighter when I'm with you. I was glad if I could ease any of his burdens. I wish I could offer advice or suggestions, but I struggled to express my opinions ever since I was young. I preferred listening to others than speaking about myself. My older brother, who is 4 years older, always looked out for me. I used to dislike that about myself, but thanks to Mike's reassurance, I've gained some confidence. Mike has an older brother who serves as the vice president in their father's company. His wife, Lyra, is close in age to me, and we get along well. She's a career-driven woman, both reliable and kind. I admire how she stands her ground and expresses her opinions, yet she is also understanding and adaptable. Seeing her confront the mother-in-law was truly impressive. However, since they live far away, I regret not being able to see them often. On the other hand, the mother-in-law behaves with the air of a company president's daughter, always confident, yet her stubbornness and arrogance are evident. Mary, you're the wife of Mike, the president. You should quit being a computer instructor and fully support your husband, she'd reprimand, overwhelming me with her pressure. Mike would back me up then, but she'd remain displeased. I sometimes felt relieved we lived apart. I hoped for a peaceful life with Mike and eventually to be blessed with children, but suddenly, Mike's father passed away from a heart attack. The news was so unexpected, it was hard for everyone to accept. Yet, Mike and his brother had to think about the company's future. Mike decided to stay in New York for a while. I returned home and waited for Mike's call. With the added responsibilities on the 2 of them, I was worried. After discussions with his brother, it was decided Mike would transfer to the New York headquarters. His brother became the president, and Mike was appointed vice president. We searched for a house in New York and settled on a pre-built single-family home. Although it was a bit far from the station, it was in a less urban area, providing a sense of security. The house had good sunlight, promising a comfortable life with Mike. Having to work late due to the handover tasks for a while, I made sure to create a comfortable environment at home so he could rest properly and prepared lunches, considering nutritional balance. I wanted to do everything I could to support him, and just like that, a month flew by. "I'm home, I'm hungry." "Thanks for working so late," he said. "I'll get dinner ready," I replied. "Thanks," he said. "Hey, Mary, my mom said she wants to come over this weekend. Is that okay?" I had been concerned that she might be feeling down since my father-in-law passed away, so this was a relief to hear. "Of course, we still have some areas to tidy up, but she's more than welcome." "Thanks, I'll let her know." "Oh, maybe I should invite my brother and his wife too?" "Yeah, that sounds good." As appropriate as it may sound, moving here made it easier for me to frequently meet Lyra, my sister-in-law, which was a pleasant surprise. That weekend, we all gathered to catch up on the current situation and share memories of my father-in-law. "It's really sad that Dad's gone, but I felt I shouldn't be down forever, so I started taking up a hobby," Mike said. Seeing my mother-in-law's cheerful face brought relief. She always carried herself with elegance, always wearing beautiful dresses and lovely accessories. Today, she looked stylish with a pale purple scarf that stood out. She seemed to have lost a little weight, but her firmness in advising Mike and his brother on company matters hasn't changed. However, since my father-in-law's passing, I felt that her strict remarks towards me increased. "Mary, we're running low on drinks. Could you go buy some?" "Anya, I can go get them," Mike said. "Oh, can you? That would be helpful then." She seemed to be more commanding towards me than she was with Lyra. I thought she might be struggling with the loss of her husband, so I decided to observe and let her comments slide for a while. After dinner, Mike drove everyone home, and the night came to an end. Since then, for some reason, my mother-in-law began visiting our home frequently. She started criticizing my housework and complaining about Lyra. Moreover, she began going through our fridge without permission, which left me stunned. "Mary, Mike's so busy right now. You should pay more attention to the meals you prepare for him. What if he collapses too?" "Yes, I'll be more careful," I said. "Also, there's still trash here. Can't you clean up perfectly?" "I'm sorry," I mumbled. It continued like this. It felt as though she was picking on me just to pass the time. But when Lyra would visit, she'd quickly leave, saying she had other things to do. She said it wasn't because she disliked me, but I felt otherwise. Perhaps she found it easier to assert herself over me, who rarely countered, than over Lyra, who always spoke her mind. I thought about finding a job to spend less time at home, but even after finding one, the harassment from my mother-in-law intensified. "Mary, we ran out of barbecue sauce at our place, so get some while you're out." "Oh, I brought a container with me, so let me take some leftovers." Her audacity sometimes left me dumbfounded. She could just as easily buy premium ingredients from an upscale store. Then an incident occurred. A necklace I cherished disappeared. It was a keepsake from my mother, which I had kept safely on a shelf in my room. The only person I could think of was my mother-in-law, who frequently visited, though I didn't want to suspect her. She often looked around our home and probably knew where most things were. Despite searching everywhere, it remained missing, so I decided to ask her about it. That's when she responded with a fierce yell, "You probably lost it yourself. How dare you suspect me? What kind of person are you?" "I'm sorry, I searched everywhere I could think of, but I couldn't find it. It's a keepsake from my mother, and it means a lot to me." More than the anger I felt towards being accused, I was devastated about losing my mother's keepsake, and tears began to roll down my face. "I don't care. It's just a necklace. Why don't you just have Mike buy you a new one?" "It's not about getting a new one," I whispered, realizing she wouldn't understand my feelings and decided not to discuss it further. However, incidents kept occurring where money from my wallet and other items around the house would go missing. Though I kept a watchful eye on my mother-in-law's actions, I never saw her take anything. Confused and emotionally exhausted, I confided in many who asserted that my mother-in-law was definitely the prime suspect. No one else had access to our home. The realization saddened me, yet there was no concrete evidence of her theft, and I couldn't understand why she would do such a thing, especially since she continued to live a lavish lifestyle from the inheritance left by my father-in-law. Seeing my distress, Lyra made a suggestion. Little did I know at the time where this would lead. About 2 weeks after speaking to Lyra, I'll be off then, Mary. Just relax and enjoy your trip. Okay, be careful, Mike said. Mike and his brother were going on a business trip to meet with a company from another state. Knowing about their trip, Lyra thought it might be a good time for us to take a break and invited me on a short vacation. Having been mentally and physically drained recently, the idea of a getaway was appealing. I packed early and placed my travel bag near the entrance, waiting for departure time. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Wondering who it could be, I checked the video feed to find my mother-in-law. Not only her, but she was accompanied by several others. Hello, Mary, I brought some friends. Please open up. Opening the front door, I found my mother-in-law and about 7 of her friends, all carrying large bags. Were they going somewhere? We're staying here tonight. Make us comfortable. Excuse me, didn't I mention it? We're seeing a play nearby tonight, and since it ends late, we're all staying here. This was news to me. My departure time was approaching. Oh, did I inconvenience you? I heard from Anya that you were open to having us. I hadn't heard anything of the sort, and it seemed she was making up the story as she went along. Growing increasingly frustrated, I replied firmly, I'm sorry, but I wasn't informed of this, and I have plans. To my reply, she looked taken aback. But you'll be back soon, right? We'll drop our bags and head out for a bit. Just prepare dinner and sleeping arrangements for us. Ignoring the fact that I had plans, I knew I couldn't let this slide. I can't. I'm going on a trip. A trip with whom? With Lyra. Oh, just with Lyra. You can go anytime. We've come all this way just for today. How long are you going to make us wait? Just then, I noticed something glinting around her neck. Wait, that necklace you're wearing. To my astonishment, it was the same necklace that was a keepsake for my mother. Anya, where did you get that necklace? Why, it's just one of my collections. Is there a problem? She answered with a smug look. That can't be right. That necklace is a limited edition, and not many are out there. While I was exchanging words with her, Lyra arrived. I was wondering why you didn't show up at our meeting place and didn't contact me. So, this is what was happening. I'm sorry I couldn't get in touch, Lyra. Seeing my expression, she instantly knew something was amiss. What happened? I got upset because the necklace she's wearing is the same one as my mother's that went missing recently. Oh, the one you kept in that box, Lyra purposefully said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Suddenly, my mother-in-law, trying to keep it from her friends, whispered to us, Can you stop this? It's embarrassing. Do you want to accuse me of theft? Yes, honestly, I find it suspicious, Lyra answered firmly. Do you have any proof that I stole it? It's embarrassing having such unreasonable daughters-in-law. Please, don't make a scene in front of my friends. With that, she turned back to her friends with a smile. Well, let's go inside, everyone. As she attempted to move inside, I remembered something. The initials, my mother's initials, are engraved on the necklace. Anya, can I have a look please? Lyra quickly went behind her to check. Enough of this. What's your mother's name? It's Kate Young, so the initials should be Key. There it is, the initials Key. The friends looked horrified and stepped back. Stop this. I didn't come here for this. Let's go, everyone. The friends, sensing the tension, quickly muttered, We're not involved, and headed towards the subway. Wait, if it's some mistake. As she tried to follow her friends, someone stopped her. What are you doing here? Weren't you supposed to be on a business trip? Standing there was Mike. Turns out, Mike's business trip was actually scheduled for the next day to investigate his mother's actions. He had purposely given her a false date. Lyra had informed Mike about the missing items from the house after I had confided in her initially. Mike was skeptical, but upon visiting his childhood home and noticing several items identical to ours, he began to suspect theft. However, without evidence, he knew she could easily deny it, leading him to come up with today's plan. Inviting friends for an overnight stay was unexpected, but he was certain his mother would visit if she believed he wasn't home. What do you want at our house? I was just leaving. She tried to leave, but I stopped her. Give it back. That necklace isn't yours. That necklace is the keepsake from Mary's parents. Why do you have it, Mom? It's not what you think. I found it in my purse. Mary must have set me up, she said, seemingly fearing the disadvantageous position she was in. My mother-in-law suddenly shifted the blame to me. Do you really think such a lie would work? There's no way Mary would do something like that. First, give the necklace back to Mary. We'll talk after that. Reluctantly, she took off the necklace, threw it on the ground, and tried to run away. Hey, wait! The three of us tried to chase her, but stopped shortly. We no longer needed to. 10 police officers stood in front of her. I, too, was unsure about what was happening, just staring at the bizarre scene. Then, one of the officers said, "We received a report from a local resident. They said someone who seemed to be causing a ruckus here was often seen entering this house when the owners were away. They asked us to come quickly." What are you talking about? I'm the mother of the son living here. Getting the police involved in a family matter, my mother-in-law retorted, looking annoyed. Wait, what do you mean she entered when we weren't home? I never did such a thing. I always come when you're home. Did the informant say anything else? When we asked the police, they mentioned that someone had witnessed my mother-in-law sneaking into our backyard, likely using a spare key to get inside. Indeed, we had a spare key hidden beneath a plant pot in the backyard. This realization gave us chills and also explained the missing items. Mike had considered this possibility and was planning to observe her actions while we were out today, but he never expected to find out the truth in this matter. Mom, why were you coming into our house when we weren't home? It's all lies. You're going to believe some unknown person's story, but you did have my precious necklace, didn't you? I told you I found it in my purse. One of the officers stepped in, saying calmly, "Let's talk about this at the station." But I didn't do anything, Mom. Stop this. I can't understand why you did this. Upon hearing her son's words, my mother-in-law collapsed to the ground. But just when it seemed like she had nowhere left to run and was feeling defeated, she suddenly flew into a rage. Because after your father passed away, I felt so lonely, and seeing her always so cheerful, I couldn't stand it. I felt better seeing her troubled. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt. Mike was red-faced, hearing her irrational reasoning. Mom, wait, let me speak. Feeling the need to confront the issue head-on, Mary stepped in front of an increasingly angry Mike. I understand where you're coming from, Anya. Perhaps I've been neglectful by always brushing off our talks. However, stealing is a different matter entirely. Did you want to upset me? Don't be ridiculous, she yelled. Did you find joy in pushing someone to their limits with such a twisted and dirty scheme? Did that fill the void of your loneliness? Shut up. Would you know about me if you're feeling down? Then tell us. We can't read minds. Don't make fun of me. Why would I tell you anything, you worthless daughter-in-law? Seeing the situation wasn't progressing, the police intervened, suggesting they move to the station. Are you really going to take me in? I can't believe this. Despite her resistance, given the eyewitness accounts of the unlawful entry and the suspicion of theft from possessing my belongings, the police decided to question my mother-in-law, and so she was promptly arrested on charges of unlawful entry and theft. She wasn't convinced, continuously protesting, "Get me a lawyer. I'm innocent, and I can't eat this garbage." However, when her father visited her during visitation, he exploded in anger, telling her to deeply reflect on her actions, to which her attitude completely changed as she cried and apologized. Considering her typically carefree behavior, he seemed to be the only authority she wouldn't defy. He further told her that unless she sincerely reflected on her actions, she shouldn't think of having a home to return to. Reluctantly, she seemed to accept the reality. Perhaps losing her husband had left my mother-in-law in search of her place. Were her fancy clothes and jewelry merely armor to keep herself strong? I even began to wonder if her different attitudes towards me and my sister-in-law were just attempts to mask her vulnerabilities. However, her excessive desires and inability to control them are a separate issue. Making wrong judgments led to this unfortunate incident. I was surprised to see the event escalate to this magnitude, but realizing that she had been using the spare key to enter our house without our knowledge genuinely terrified me. Later, I found out that the couple living diagonally across from us had reported her. The wife, who works from home, had noticed my mother-in-law entering our yard suspiciously multiple times and found it odd. I couldn't be anything but grateful for their brave actions. Since then, we've been leading a peaceful life. Just to be safe, we changed our locks and stopped hiding a spare key in the yard. Mike severed ties with his mother and made her promise not to contact us ever again. If she attempted to, he warned of legal action. After her release, she returned to her rural childhood home and is reportedly leading a humble life, a stark contrast to her past lavish lifestyle. Being watched by her father, she helps around the house from early morning. I truly hope she reevaluates her past excessive actions. Meanwhile, my own father has moved in with us in case my mother-in-law decides to pay another unexpected visit. He's here to ensure my safety, but there's another reason he's with us. I'm currently expecting our first child, anticipating the birth of his grandchild. My kind father and the support of Mike make me want to be a mother who embodies both tenderness and strength. While money and possessions can provide a sense of fulfillment, it's the presence of loved ones that truly fills the heart. We're discussing living arrangements, and surrounded by those dear to us, we aim to protect our peaceful daily lives. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.
I can still feel the sting of his hands shoving me to the floor, the coldness in his eyes as he threw me out like garbage. This is what my 61st birthday has come to. My own son treating me like I'm nothing. Like I haven't spent my entire life loving him, raising him, sacrificing for him. And now, because of that wretched wife of his, he can't even stand the sight of me. Laura, even her name makes my blood boil. From the moment Henry brought her home, I knew she was trouble. The way she looked at me, like I was just an obstacle in her path. The way she whispered in Henry's ear, turning him against me little by little. I warned him not to marry her, begged him to see through her manipulations, but he was blinded by lust, by the idea that she loved him unconditionally. Ha! The only thing that woman loves is herself. And now, because of her, I've lost everything, my son, my grandchildren, the family I've dedicated my life to. Cast aside like yesterday's trash. As I sit there wallowing, a car pulls up beside me. The window rolls down, revealing the concerned face of my best friend, Nicole. "Megan, what happened? What are you doing out here?" she asks, her voice laced with worry. I can barely choke out the words. Henry, he kicked me out, said I was crazy and that it was his house now. Nicole's eyes widen in shock, then narrow in anger. "He did what? On your birthday? Oh, honey, get in the car. You're coming home with me." I climb into the passenger seat, my body numb as Nicole drives. She keeps glancing over at me, her brow furrowed. "This is unacceptable, Megan. Henry can't treat you like this. Something has to be done." I shake my head sadly. "What can I do, Mags? He's a grown man. He's made his choice." Nicole purses her lips, a determined glint in her eye. "Maybe so, but that doesn't mean he gets to get away with it. You're his mother, for God's sake. It's time Henry and that wicked wife of his learned that there are consequences for their actions." I turn to her, confused. "What are you saying?" A slow smile spreads across Nicole's face. "I'm saying, my dear, that it's time for a little revenge, and I know just the person to help us get it." As we speed into the night, I can't help but feel a spark of hope. I feel a flicker of something I haven't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, I can make Henry and Laura pay for the pain they've caused. Maybe karma will finally catch up to them. The day started off well enough. It was my birthday, and despite everything that had happened with Henry, I was determined to make the most of it. I spent the morning tidying up the house, putting up a few decorations, and preparing a special dinner. I even bought a cake from the bakery down the street, the one Henry always loved as a kid. Around noon, I called Henry, my heart fluttering with a mix of hope and nerves. To my surprise, he actually answered. "Hey, Mom, what's up?" His tone was neutral, guarded. I took a deep breath. "Well, I was wondering if you, Laura, and the kids would like to come over for dinner tonight. It's my birthday, and I thought it would be nice to spend some time together as a family." There was a long pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background, like he was discussing it with someone. Finally, he spoke. "Yeah, okay, we can do that. What time?" Relief washed over me. "How about 5 p.m.? I'm making your favorite lasagna." "Sure, see you then," he said, hanging up before I could say anything else. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. By the time 5 p.m. rolled around, everything was perfect. The lasagna was bubbling in the oven, the table was set, and the cake was proudly displayed on the counter. Right on time, the doorbell rang. I practically ran to answer it, a huge smile on my face. But the moment I opened the door, my heart sank. Henry stood there with a scowl etched on his face. Beside him was Laura, her lips curled into a sneer. The kids were nowhere to be seen. "Where are the children?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Laura let out a harsh laugh. "We decided it was best they didn't come. Wouldn't want them exposed to any more of your toxic influence." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Toxic influence? What are you talking about?" She stepped forward, jabbing a finger at me. "Don't play dumb, Megan. We all know what a terrible mother you were. The way you turned Henry against his own father, the constant guilt-tripping and manipulation. It's no wonder he wants nothing to do with you." Tears stung my eyes. I looked to Henry, silently pleading for him to defend me, but he just stood there, his arms crossed, saying nothing. "That's not true," I managed to choke out. "I've always loved and supported Henry. I would never do anything to hurt him." Laura's eyes flashed with anger. "Spare us the martyr act. You're just a selfish, vindictive woman who can't stand that Henry has moved on with his life, that he chose me over you." Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged forward, ready to slap that smug look off her face. But Henry stepped between us, grabbing my wrist in a painful grip. "Don't you dare touch my wife," he growled. "You're pathetic, you know that? Coming up with this whole birthday charade, trying to worm your way back in. Well, it's not going to work. We're done with you." With that, he shoved me backward, sending me stumbling. I caught myself on the doorframe, tears now flowing freely down my cheeks. "Henry, please," I whispered. "I'm your mother." But he just shook his head, his eyes cold. "Not anymore. Come on, Laura, let's go." I watched helplessly as they turned and walked away, slamming the door behind them. The sound echoed through the empty house, a brutal finality to it. And there I stood, alone on my birthday, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in the aftermath of Henry and Laura's cruelty. Minutes, hours, it all blurred together. The pain in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt before, a deep aching void that threatened to swallow me whole. Eventually, I managed to close the door, my hands shaking. I stumbled to the couch, collapsing onto the cushions as sobs racked my body. How could he do this to me? My own son treating me like I was nothing, like I hadn't spent my entire life loving and caring for him. The sound of my phone ringing jolted me out of my despair. I glanced at the screen, seeing Nicole's name. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, not wanting to burden her with my problems. But the thought of facing this alone was too much to bear. I answered, my voice thick with tears. "Hello. Megan, what's wrong? Did something happen with Henry?" The concern in her voice was my undoing. I broke down, the whole sordid story spilling out between gasps and sobs. Nicole listened patiently, offering words of comfort and support. "That's it," she said firmly when I finished. "This has gone too far. Henry and Laura can't keep treating you like this. It's time for them to face some consequences." I sniffled, wiping my eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's time for a little payback. They think they can just walk all over you, but they've got another thing coming. You're a strong woman, Megan. It's time to start acting like it." Her words ignited a spark within me, a flicker of anger amidst the pain. She was right. I couldn't just sit here and wallow. I needed to do something to take back control. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier now. "What do you have in mind?" I could practically hear Nicole's grin through the phone. "Meet me at the diner in an hour. I've got someone I want you to meet. Trust me, he's going to be a big help." An hour later, I was sitting across from Nicole in a booth at the local diner. She had a mischievous glint in her eye as she sipped her coffee. "So who is this mystery person?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. As if on cue, the bell above the door jingled. Nicole waved at someone behind me. There he is now. I turned, my eyes widening as a tall, broad-shouldered man approached our table. He had a rugged, no-nonsense look about him, like someone who had seen his fair share of trouble. "Megan, meet my brother Jack," Nicole said, gesturing for him to sit. "He's a private investigator." Jack nodded at me, his gaze assessing. "Nicole filled me in on your situation. I'm sorry to hear about what your son and his wife did. That's rough." I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant even as the pain twisted in my gut. "It is what it is, but Nicole seems to think you can help." He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. In my line of work, I've learned that everyone has secrets, skeletons in their closet. And from what Nicole's told me, I'm betting your daughter-in-law has more than a few. A tingle of anticipation ran down my spine. What are you saying? Jack smiled, slow and dangerous. I'm saying, let me dig into Laura's past. If there's dirt to be found, I'll find it. And once we have that ammunition, well, let's just say karma has a way of coming back around. I sat back, my mind reeling with the possibilities. Could this really work? Could I finally make Henry and Laura pay for what they'd done? Looking into Jack's confident eyes, I made my decision. I'm in, let's do this. He nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Give me a week. I'll be in touch, he said as he stood to leave. I felt a new sense of purpose and determination. They thought they could break me, but they were wrong. It was time for revenge. The week crawled by, each day feeling like an eternity of waiting and wondering. I tried to keep myself busy, throwing myself into cleaning the house, running errands, anything to distract myself from the constant churning of my thoughts. What would Jack find? Would it be enough to bring Henry and Laura down? Nicole checked in on me daily, offering words of encouragement and support. She was the only thing keeping me sane, the only person who truly understood the depth of my pain and anger. Finally, on the 7th day, my phone rang. It was Jack. Megan, it's me. I've got something. Can you meet me at my office in an hour? My heart leaped into my throat. Of course, I'll be there. I arrived at Jack's office with 20 minutes to spare, my nerves jingling. Nicole was already there, pacing the small waiting area. She gave me a tight hug when I entered. Are you ready for this? She asked, searching my face. I nodded, steeling myself, as ready as I'll ever be. Jack emerged from his office, a grim expression on his face. Come on in, ladies. We settled into the chairs opposite his desk, the air thick with tension. Jack opened a manila folder, spreading out a series of documents and photographs. So I did some digging into Laura's background, he began, tapping the papers. And let me tell you, this woman is no saint. He slid a document toward me. First off, she has a criminal record embezzlement from her previous job. She managed to avoid jail time, but it wasn't pretty. I stared at the paper, a monk shot of Laura staring back at me. She looked younger, but those cold eyes were unmistakable. But that's not all, Jack continued, his voice grave. I also found out that she's a person of interest in the death of her ex-boyfriend. Nicole gasped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What do you mean? I managed to ask, my voice shaking. Jack handed me a newspaper clipping. 3 years ago, her ex was found dead under mysterious circumstances. The police suspected foul play, but they could never prove anything. Laura was the last person to see him alive. I scanned the article, my eyes catching on phrases like suspicious death and ongoing investigation. My mind reeled, trying to reconcile this information with the woman my son had married. So what does this mean? Nicole asked, voicing the question in my mind. It means, Jack said, that we have the ammunition we need. We can use this information to confront Laura and Henry. They need to know that we're not backing down. Jack leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. It means we have leverage. If this information comes to light, Laura's life as she knows it would be over. Her reputation, her marriage, everything. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. So what do we do now? A slow smile spread across Jack's face. Now we use it. We let Laura know that we have this information and that if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Henry to make things right with you. Nicole nodded, her eyes gleaming. And if she refuses? Jack shrugged. Then we go to the police. We let them reopen the investigation into her ex's death. One way or another, Laura will face the consequences of her actions. I sat there, stunned, trying to process it all. Could it really be this simple? Could I really make Laura pay for what she's done, for turning Henry against me? Looking at the determination on Nicole and Jack's faces, I felt a surge of strength. They believed in me, believed that I deserved justice, And for the first time since that awful birthday, I believed it too. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady. "Let's make them pay." Jack grinned, a predatory gleam in his eye. "Excellent. Give me a day to put everything in motion. By this time tomorrow, Laura won't know what hit her." As we left the office, Nichols squeezed my hand. "You're doing the right thing, Megan. Don't ever doubt that." I squeezed back, feeling a sense of purpose and righteous anger. They had picked the wrong woman to mess with. It was time for Laura to learn that lesson the hard way. True to his word, Jack called me the next day. "It's done," he said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "I've sent all the information to Laura, along with a message letting her know that if she doesn't want it to go public, she needs to convince Henry to make amends with you." I felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with nervousness. "Do you think it will work?" "Only one way to find out. But trust me, with the dirt we have on her, she'd be crazy not to comply." I hung up, my mind racing. Would Laura really cave? Would she really force Henry to apologize and make things right? A part of me dared to hope, even as another part whispered that it was too good to be true. Hours passed with no word. I paced my living room, jumping at every sound, convinced it was the doorbell or the phone. But as evening fell, there was still nothing. I was about to give up and go to bed when there was a pounding at the door. My heart in my throat, I opened it to find Henry standing there, his face full of fury. "What the hell did you do?" he snarled, pushing past me into the house. I stumbled back, caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" He turned on me, his eyes blazing. "Don't play dumb. Laura told me everything about the private investigator, about you digging up her past." "What? You thought you could blackmail her into making me forgive you?" I stood my ground, lifting my chin. "I didn't blackmail anyone. I just let her know that her actions have consequences, that she can't destroy my life and get away with it." Henry let out a harsh laugh. "Destroy your life? Are you serious? You're the one trying to destroy our marriage, our family, first with your constant guilt-tripping and manipulation, and now this." Anger surged through me, hot and bright. "I'm not the one who turned you against me, Henry. That was all Laura. She's poisoned you. Can't you see that? She's a criminal, a liar, maybe even a murderer." For a moment, Henry looked stunned, then his face hardened. "You're unbelievable. You really think I'm going to believe your crazy accusations over my own wife, the mother of my children?" "They're not accusations, they're facts. Jack found proof." "I don't care what your detective friend found," Henry roared. "Laura is my wife, and I trust her. I love her, and nothing you say or do is going to change that." Tears stung my eyes, blurring my vision. "So that's it then? You're choosing her over me, your own mother?" Henry's jaw clenched. "You made that choice for me the moment you decided to pull this stunt. I'm done with you, Mom. Done with your lies, your schemes, all of it." He turned to leave, and panic seized me. I couldn't lose him, not like this. "Henry, please," but he was already gone, slamming the door behind him with a finality that shook me to my core. I sank to the floor, sobs tearing from my throat. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. The truth was supposed to set me free, to bring Henry back to me. Instead, it had only driven him further away. Through my tears, I heard my phone ringing. It was Jack. I answered, my voice thick and shaky. "Megan, what happened? Did it work?" A bitter laugh escaped me. No, it didn't work. Henry, he's gone. He chose Laura." There was a pause, then Jack spoke, his tone determined. "Then we move on to plan B. We go to the police and get them to reopen the investigation into Laura's ex's death." I shook my head even though Jack couldn't see me. "What's the point? It won't change anything. Henry's made his choice." "This isn't about Henry anymore," Jack said firmly. "This is about justice, about making sure Laura pays for what she's done, one way or another." I closed my eyes, exhaustion and grief washing over me. Could I do it? Could I really destroy my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren? But then I remembered the look in Henry's eyes, the venom in his voice, and the way Laura had smirked, so smug and self-satisfied. They had brought this on themselves, and now they would face the consequences. "Okay," I whispered, a new resolve hardening in my chest. "Let's do it. Let's make her pay." The next few days were a blur of activity. Jack and I gathered all the evidence he had collected, organizing it into a neat package to present to the police. Nickel was a constant presence, offering support and encouragement when my resolve wavered. Finally, the day arrived. We walked into the police station, heads held high, ready to blow the lid off Laura's sordid past. The detective listened intently as we laid out our case, his brow furrowing as he examined the documents and photographs. When we finished, he sat back with a grim expression on his face. "This is serious stuff," he said, tapping the file. "If what you're saying is true, we have grounds to reopen the investigation into Miss Wilson's ex-boyfriend's death." I felt a surge of vindication. "It is true, every word of it." The detective nodded. "All right then, leave this with me. I'll get the ball rolling." We left the station with a sense of anticipation thrumming through me. It was really happening. Laura was finally going to face the music. 3 days later, I received a call from Jack. "Turn on the news," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. I did as he said, my heart pounding as the anchor's face filled the screen. "Breaking news," she announced, her expression grave. "Local woman Laura Berlin has been arrested in connection with the previously unsolved death of her ex-boyfriend Brian Cox. New evidence has come to light, prompting police to reopen the investigation." I watched, transfixed, as they showed footage of Laura being led out of her and Henry's house in handcuffs, her face a mask of shock and anger. Henry followed behind, looking stunned and lost. A fierce satisfaction burned in my chest. She was finally getting what she deserved. But my joy was short-lived. The news report went on to describe how Henry had to use their savings to post Laura's bail and hire a lawyer. It was a financial blow, one that would undoubtedly put a strain on their marriage. I should have felt guilty knowing that I had played a part in their hardship, but all I could think was that it served them right. They had brought this on themselves with their cruelty and lies. Over the next few weeks, I watched from afar as the drama unfolded. Laura's arrest made headlines, and the public was ruthless. People speculated about her involvement in her ex's death and what other secrets she might be hiding. Henry put on a brave face, standing by his wife in public, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. He looked haggard, worn down by the constant scrutiny and whispers. Part of me wanted to reach out, to offer comfort and support, but I hardened my heart. I reminded myself of how he had cast me aside, the vicious words he had hurled at me. He had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. One afternoon, as I was returning from the grocery store, I spotted a familiar figure on my doorstep. It was Henry, his shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed. For a moment, I considered ignoring him, pretending I wasn't home, but curiosity got the better of me. "What do you want?" I asked coldly as I approached, my arms laden with bags. Henry looked up, his expression a mix of exhaustion and desperation. "Mom, I need your help." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, now you need my help? What happened to being done with me and my schemes?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. I know I said some awful things, but this is bigger than that. Laura's in real trouble, Mom. The evidence against her is bad." A flicker of unease passed through me. "What are you saying?" Henry's voice broke. "I'm saying I don't know what to do. The lawyer fees alone are bankrupting us, and if Laura goes to prison, I can't raise the kids on my own. I need you, Mom, please." I stared at him, torn between the urge to comfort and the desire to lash out. He looked so broken, so defeated. But then I remembered the pain he had caused, the way he had abandoned me. I straightened my spine, my voice like ice. "You should have thought of that before you turned your back on me. I'm sorry, Henry, but you're on your own." With that, I brushed past him, ignoring his pleas and apologies. He had made his choice, and now he would live with the consequences. A few days after Henry's desperate visit, I received an unexpected call. It was Laura's mother, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "Megan, I know we've had our differences, but I need to ask a favor," she said, the words seeming to pain her. I felt a flicker of surprise. What kind of favor? "It's the kids. With everything going on with Laura's case, Henry's struggling to keep up. He needs a break. I was hoping you could take the children for the weekend." I hesitated, torn. On one hand, the thought of spending time with my grandchildren filled me with longing. It had been so long since I'd seen them. But on the other hand, the idea of doing anything to help Henry and Laura after everything they'd done galled me. "Please, Megan," Laura's mother pressed, as if sensing my reluctance. "I know you love those kids. They need some stability right now, and Lord knows they won't get it from Henry or Laura." I sighed, my resolve crumbling. She was right. Whatever issues I had with their parents, my grandchildren were innocent. They deserved better than to be caught in the middle of this mess. "All right," I agreed. "I'll take them for the weekend, but I'm doing this for them, not for Henry or Laura." "Of course. Thank you, Megan. I'll let Henry know to drop them off Friday evening." True to her word, Henry arrived on my doorstep that Friday with the kids in tow. He looked even worse than the last time I'd seen him, his face gaunt and shadowed. "Mom," he greeted me, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it." I nodded stiffly, my attention on the children. They looked up at me, their eyes wide and uncertain. "Grandma." My granddaughter cried, breaking into a smile. She rushed forward, wrapping her little arms around my waist. I hugged her back, blinking back sudden tears. "Hello, sweetheart. I've missed you." My grandson was more reserved, hovering by Henry's side. I knelt down, opening my arms. "Come here, buddy. It's okay." Slowly, he stepped into my embrace, his small body trembling. My heart ached for him, for both of them. Henry cleared his throat. "I'll pick them up Sunday evening. If anything comes up, just give me a call." I straightened, meeting his gaze coolly. "We'll be fine. Enjoy your weekend." With a final nod, he left, leaving me alone with the kids. I took a deep breath, forcing a smile. Who wants pizza for dinner? The weekend passed in a blur of laughter, games, and stories. For a little while, I was able to forget the drama and heartache, lost in the simple joy of being with my grandchildren. But all too soon, it was over. Henry arrived to collect the kids, his expression guarded as they gathered their things. My granddaughter tugged on my hand. "Grandma, can we come stay with you again soon? We had so much fun." I smiled, smoothing her hair. "Of course, honey, anytime you want." Henry's jaw tightened. "We should get going. Say goodbye, kids." They hugged me tightly, their little faces sad. I watched as they climbed into Henry's car, my heart heavy. As he prepared to leave, Henry paused and turned back to me. "Listen, Mom, about what they said. I don't want you getting any ideas. This was a one-time thing." I bristled, anger sparking. "Excuse me? You think I'm trying to turn them against you?" "Wouldn't be the first time," he muttered. I saw red. "How dare you? I have done nothing but love and support those children, which is more than I can say for you and Laura. You're so wrapped up in your own drama, you can't even see how much they're hurting." Henry's face flushed. "You have no idea what we're going through. No idea the stress, the pressure." "And whose fault is that?" I cut him off. "You chose this, Henry. You chose Laura and all the chaos that comes with her. Don't you dare put that on me." He stared at me, his eyes hard. "This isn't over, Mom. I won't let you poison my kids against me the way you did with Dad." With that, he got in the car and drove away, leaving me shaking with rage and hurt. I stood there, watching until the car disappeared from view, a cold determination settling over me. If Henry wanted to play hardball, then so be it. I was done playing nice. It was time to end this once and for all. The day of Laura's trial arrived, cold and gray. I dressed with care, choosing a somber black suit that radiated quiet authority. Nickel picked me up, her face set with grim determination. "Are you ready for this?" she asked as we drove to the courthouse. I nodded, my jaw tight. I've been ready for a long time. We met Jack on the steps, his expression serious. "I've got a surprise for you," he said, leading us inside. I tracked down Brian Cox's family. They're here to testify. I felt a surge of gratitude and vindication. With their testimony, Laura's fate would be sealed. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension. I took my seat behind the prosecutor's table, my heart pounding as Laura was led in, her wrists and ankles shackled. She looked pale and drawn, but her eyes still glittered with malice when they met mine. Henry sat stiffly beside her, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. I looked away, focusing on the judge as he called the court to order. The trial was grueling and emotional. The prosecutor laid out the evidence against Laura in detail, painting a picture of a cruel, calculating woman who would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. But it was the testimony of Brian Cox's family that truly sealed her fate. His mother, a frail silver-haired woman, spoke of her son's kind heart and bright future cut short. His sister wept as she recounted Laura's controlling and abusive behavior, how she had isolated Brian from his loved ones. Through it all, Laura sat stone-faced, her eyes cold and empty. Henry grew more and more agitated, his knee bouncing and his hands clenched into fists. Finally, it was time for the verdict. The jury filed back in, their faces somber. The foreman stood, clearing his throat. In the matter of the state versus Laura Berlin, on the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs. Laura's face drained of color, her mouth falling open in shock. Henry leaped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. "No," he shouted, his voice raw with anguish. "No, this is wrong. She's innocent." The judge banged his gavel, calling for order. "Mr. Wilson, control yourself, or I will have you removed from this courtroom." Henry subsided, collapsing back into his seat, his head in his hands. Laura turned to him, her expression desperate. "Henry, do something. You can't let them do this to me." But Henry wouldn't look at her, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The bailiff stepped forward, preparing to lead Laura away. I watched, a strange mix of emotions swirling within me. Triumph, yes, but also a hollow sort of sadness. It had come to this, my own son broken and humiliated, his life in ruins. As Laura was escorted out, she turned back, her eyes locking with mine. In that moment, I saw the depth of her hatred, the venom in her soul. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low and deadly. "I'll make you pay for this, I swear it." I met her gaze steadily, unflinching. "You've already paid, Laura. You made your choices, and now you'll face the consequences. Goodbye." With that, I turned and walked out, my head held high. It was over. Justice had been served. But even as relief washed over me, a sense of sadness lingered. I couldn't shake the lingering unease. Henry's anguished face haunted me, the devastation in his eyes. Had I gone too far? Had my quest for revenge blinded me to the collateral damage? I shook my head, pushing the doubts aside. No, Henry had made his bed, and now he would lie in it. He had chosen Laura, chosen to turn his back on me. Now he would have to live with the fallout. I stepped out into the cold gray day, drawing my coat tighter around me. It was time to move on, to build a new life for myself. A life without Henry, without Laura's toxic influence. A life of my own making.
You got like $3 million, huh? Yeah, we're already building a fancy house for us. I got my dream kitchen planned. My mother-in-law says all dreamy like I've quit my job, done to start a business with Ashley's inheritance. My husband says, looking too happy about it, wait a sec, Ashley didn't get any inheritance yet, you're quitting your job and building stuff already? What's the deal? Let's not FIP here. You got money. How about we take a trip before jumping into this house thing? Hawaii, maybe? My father-in-law adds, making things even more confusing. What are they even thinking? They want to spend the money I got from my mom on whatever they want. I'm mad as heck, but I don't know what to do. A few months back, let me take you there. My name is Ashley. I'm 38 and I teach at a high school. I've been married to David for 12 years. He's 2 years older and works in an office. Right after we tied the knot, our daughter Julie came along, and ever since, my life's been a whirlwind of work and raising her. Today, we're off to see my mom at the hospital. Hey, Grandma, it's been a bit, I say. Julie dear, come here, my mom says gently, running her fingers through Julie's hair. She looks thinner, and her face isn't as lively. There's this guy in his suit standing by her bed. He nods at me as I glance his way and then leaves. Mom, who's that guy? Just someone I know. Nothing to worry about. How are you holding up, Ashley and David? Is he doing okay? My mom's eyes, a soft shade of blue, twinkle as she smiles. She met my dad when he was in the import-export business overseas, and she moved to the U.S. to marry him. Raising a kid in a new country couldn't have been easy, but they did it together. Mom taught me a lot growing up, which is why I'm able to teach now. I'm grateful to my parents for giving me such a good upbringing. Dad passed away a few years back, and since then, Mom's been on her own, dealing with illness and hospital stays. She handed off the business to a relative and now spends her days quietly in the hospital. I'm good, Mom. Anything you need. Just having you and Julie here is more than enough. After chatting with Mom for a while, Julie and I head home. Julie fills me in on school stuff and the latest book she's read. She's 10, a tricky age, but we get along well. Even setting aside my mom's goggles, I think she's a smart, honest kid who's growing up nicely. We're back. Hey, welcome back. How's my mom doing? David asks when we walk in. Same old, same old. And you? How's your seminar? Heard good things about it. Excited for the next one? Lately, David's been going to seminars about quitting his job and starting a side hustle. Seems like he's after more money, but his job's not bad, and we're doing fine with my income. I don't like how obsessed he is with money. Probably gets it from his parents. They've always been tight with cash, always asking for small amounts whenever we see them. They've never bothered with Christmas gifts for Julie either. Thankfully, they live far away, so we don't see them much. David helps out around the house, though, so it's manageable. As long as I've got my mom, David, Julie, and our simple life, I'm happy. Then one day, I got a call from the hospital. Mom's condition had taken a turn for the worse, and she was in critical condition. When we reached the hospital, my mom was barely hanging on. Mom, Grandma, Ashley, I've always wanted you to be happy. Take care of Julie. She means everything. I love you. Those were her final words. My mom poured her heart into raising me alongside my dad, who cherished Julie more than anything. Seeing her peaceful face in the coffin, all I could do was cry. Julie stood by me, crying too. A while after Mom passed, an envelope arrived from a law firm. Ashley opened it, puzzled by the unfamiliar sender. Inside was a document. I've been given your mother's will, leaving everything to you, Ashley. Her mom never talked about inheritance, so she was surprised. But with the letter in hand, she decided to visit the law firm alone. Hi, I'm Ed, the attorney, said the man with glasses, the same one from the hospital room. You were there when I visited your mom. Ashley said, recognizing him. Yeah, we met there. Your mom entrusted me with something, Ed said gently, almost bringing Ashley to tears. 500 million? Ashley exclaimed in shock. Yeah, Ashley. When your dad passed, you let your mom have all the inheritance. Now, with what she had and what she left you, After taxes, that's the sum. Ed explained. I knew my parents were well off, but I never asked for money after getting married, and I avoided talking about inheritance. It's overwhelming, Ashley said, feeling a bit dizzy. But it's a sign of love from my mom. I'll leave it to you, Ed. My mom cared about you more than anything. She asked me to assist you if needed. You can talk to me about anything, Ed said. Thank you. I appreciate it. Ashley nodded to Ed and left the room. As time went by, nearing her mother's 49th day memorial, David, her husband, started bringing up her mother's inheritance often. He knew they were wealthy when they married, but Ashley found his constant probing uncomfortable, especially during her mourning period. Whenever she asked him to stop, he would, but then subtly brought it up again later. And then there were her in-laws at her mother's memorial. Her father-in-law offered, if you're worried about the inheritance, we can help, huh? We've had our share of inheritance disputes. It can get complicated when unmarried siblings pass away. If you need help, we're here. Her mother-in-law chimed in, I'm sure Ashley. Ashley, who had never felt inclined to involve them before, could only offer a vague response as they pretended to understand. About 3 months after her mother's passing, David, who had been relatively quiet, finally reached his breaking point. Have you gotten your mom's inheritance yet? David's question sent a shiver down Ashley's spine. Not yet, Ashley fibbed. The process is complicated. It's been 3 months since she passed, right? Why the delay? David pressed, but then abruptly announced he was heading to bed, leaving Ashley with a gnawing feeling in her chest. The next day, while Ashley and Julie were cleaning up after dinner, the doorbell rang. Julie rushed to answer it, and Ashley, peering out from the kitchen, saw her in-laws along with David returning from work. Why are they here? Ashley whispered to Julie. It's okay, Mom. I'll go to my room, Julie said, darting away nervously. What's happening? Ashley asked as her in-laws entered. Never mind that, Ed, her father-in-law, said cheerfully, grabbing a beer from the fridge. We're here to celebrate. You inherited over $300 million. We've even started building a duplex for us all to live in, complete with your dream kitchen. Listen, Ashley, be happy. Her mother-in-law chimed in dreamily, we're planning to build a duplex. We've put down half of our savings and some money Mom and Dad saved up. The loan's in my name, but you can settle it all with your inheritance. It's a way to give back to them. Would I quit my job? I'm starting a business with your inheritance, David announced, looking oddly pleased. Wait a minute. What's going on? I haven't received any inheritance yet, and why are you quitting your job and talking about a duplex? Let's not play games. You have an inheritance. How about we take a trip before diving into house plans? Maybe Hawaii? As the chaos unfolded, David and her mother-in-law seemed to agree with Ed. David, with a mocking laugh, said, You're being miserly, Ashley. We checked it out because you kept saying you hadn't received the inheritance. If you don't process it within 3 months, you can't refuse it. So whether you told the truth or not, you've inherited, right? Considering my father-in-law's company, it must be more than $300 million. We'll live comfortably thanks to them. Thanks, Mom. Make sure to arrange money for the duplex and my capital. Hearing David speak like that left her feeling lightheaded. But what kind of people are these, wanting to use my precious inheritance for my mom as they please, indulging in luxury? I was burning with anger, but I couldn't speak. I worried about Julie, who was in the other room. I'm stepping out for a bit, I called out to them, but they were too engrossed in discussing their plans for the inheritance. I left without even grabbing my wallet. The night air was brisk, and as I reached a familiar hilltop park, the tears started flowing. I cried silently, feeling the weight of frustration and exploitation. My emotions were a jumble, but I couldn't bring myself to mention divorce now, with Julie still in the picture. My mother's words echoed in my mind, take care of Julie above all else, and I cried anew. Suddenly, someone approached me. Startled, I looked up and they began speaking softly. 3 days later, I called my husband and in-laws to a restaurant with private rooms. So, you're back home after that day? Did you withdraw the money, Ashley? You shouldn't leave without telling your husband. Ignoring their words, I handed them a document, a filled-out divorce notice. David, I want a divorce. What? What's this? David's panic was palpable, and my in-laws exchanged worried glances. I can't continue like this. I'm done, I replied firmly, facing David's escalating anger. You're leaving us just because you got the inheritance? You've become so greedy, Ashley retorted. Ever since I inherited from my mom, you've been out of control, quitting jobs, planning to live with your parents without consulting me, using my savings to build a house, and now planning trips. Who's the one who changed when the money came? I can't stay with people like this. You can't just divorce me out of nowhere, David whined. That's right. Half of everything is David's, including our savings and half of the inheritance. David and my in-laws barked as they closed in on me. Just as I was about to respond, the door opened, revealing Julie and attorney Ed. Dad, Grandpa, Grandma, you should know better. Mom's inheritance isn't shared property, right, Mr. Ed? I'm attorney Ed. Ashley's mom entrusted me with this matter, and I've been advising her, Ed explained with a bow, leaving David flustered. But wait. Inherited property isn't shared. It's not subject to division, he clarified. What? That can't be right. Is this a mistake? David stuttered. That can't be. I was stunned by the reaction. It seemed they genuinely believed they were entitled to my inheritance. If that's the case, it's even more reason not to divorce. I'll stick by you no matter what, my husband shouted with bloodshot eyes, disregarding everything. Stop it. Julie intervened calmly. Since Mom inherited, Dad hasn't thought about her once. Grandpa and Grandma only care about money. They never even mention me. I can't see them as family. David and my in-laws were taken aback. When I was upset about the inheritance, Julie spoke up. She told me Dad, Grandpa, and Grandma were wrong. They're trying to take Grandma's legacy. Mom, I'm with you. Let's fight this together. With those words, I made a decision. I contacted Ed and arranged this meeting. Julie, that's not true. Dad wants what's best for you, and you'd be happier with us, wouldn't you? My husband and in-laws pleaded desperately. Children shouldn't interfere. Julie, with a look of frustration, said, I'm going with Mom. I can't stay with you anymore, and turned away. We've made our decision. Julie and I will leave, I said calmly, which angered David. I've never cheated, and you can't force a divorce. I'll get a lawyer. We'll get that money, he threatened. Then I'll handle it from here, Ed intervened quietly. The crux of the matter is whether there are serious grounds for ending the marriage. Quitting his job, using our savings without consent, making decisions unilaterally, and Julie expressing her distress. We have multiple arguments to support our case. Additionally, your daughter has recorded evidence of all of you pressuring Ashley for her inheritance. That should serve as compelling evidence. David slumped, and my in-laws went pale. After Matt, Julie, and I left the restaurant, a year later, thanks to Ed's efforts, my divorce with David was finalized. Julie and I moved into my mother's old house, but we received numerous letters pleading for reconciliation, and David was spotted near Julie's school, prompting us to seek a restraining order with Ed's help. After that, things quieted down. Rumor has it they did build a duplex. My retired in-laws had to find jobs at a factory, and despite David's attempts, he ended up doing manual labor. According to neighbors, their new home was rife with constant arguments, making them unpopular in the neighborhood. Julie and I continue to live peacefully, supporting each other. Recently, Julie expressed a desire to study abroad in my mother's homeland to sever ties completely with my ex-husband. We decided to move overseas using a portion of my mother's inheritance. I'm certain she would approve. Julie seems to thrive in her new school, and I found work as a teacher there. Here's hoping these tranquil days persist. My younger brother sold my sports car and gambled away every penny, losing it all, including my car. When I confronted him, he confessed with a smirk, then slapped me and threw me out of the house. Furious and humiliated, I swore revenge. But the next morning, he woke up to a shocking surprise waiting for him, something that would change his life forever. He never saw it coming. My name is Barbara, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. It wasn't a role I chose, but rather one I seemed destined to fill. I grew up in a small suburban town with my parents and younger brother, Tom. Our home wasn't extravagant, but it was comfortable, with a backyard where Tom and I used to play as kids. Those early days were simpler, but as we grew older, the cracks in our family began to show, and I became all too aware of where I stood in their eyes. From a young age, I worked hard at everything I did. School, chores, savings, you name it, I was always the diligent one. I had dreams of building a stable, fulfilling life and knew the only way to get there was through dedication and effort. Tom, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. While I saved every penny for things I truly needed, like a laptop for school, Tom would spend whatever he could get his hands on. Even as a teenager, he was reckless, always chasing thrills. At first, it was small things like blowing his allowance on arcade games or flashy sneakers, but it didn't take long for his spending to spiral out of control. Despite our stark differences, my parents doted on Tom. He was their golden boy, and they never seemed to notice, or care, how much trouble he caused. When Tom barely scraped through high school, my parents celebrated his graduation as though he had topped his class. Meanwhile, when I earned a scholarship to college after months of hard work and sleepless nights, their response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, Barbara," Mom had said, already turning her attention to Tom's latest antics. It hurt, but I'd grown used to it. I told myself that their favoritism wouldn't matter once I built the life I wanted. So I worked harder. College was my escape. It was the first time I felt truly seen for who I was, someone capable, determined, and ambitious. I excelled in my studies and landed a corporate job right after graduation. I started saving immediately, first for an apartment and then for a car. Both milestones were significant for me, symbols of my independence and hard work. But while I was striving to build my future, Tom was doing everything he could to avoid responsibility. He dropped out of college within a year, claiming it wasn't for him. Instead of finding a job or figuring out what he wanted to do, he spent his time gambling at local casinos. My parents never held him accountable. When he blew through his savings, they gave him more. "He just needs some time to figure things out," Dad would say whenever I tried to bring it up. Things finally came to a head one evening when I returned home from work to find my car missing. At first, I thought it had been stolen. My heart pounded as I called the police to report it, but something about the situation didn't sit right with me. When I told my parents what had happened, they exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing. That's when Tom stumbled through the front door, drunk and disheveled. "Tom," I snapped, rushing toward him. "Do you know where my car is?" He looked at me with glassy eyes and laughed bitterly. "Yeah," he slurred. "I lost it." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "What do you mean you lost it?" I asked, my voice rising. Tom sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "The casino," he muttered. I played poker. Lost all my money, so I sold the car to keep playing. But I lost that too." I stared at him, stunned. "You sold my car?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this to me?" Before Tom could respond, Mom stepped in. "Barbara, calm down," she said, her tone dismissive. "It's just a car. You can always buy another one." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's not just a car," I shouted. "It's mine. I worked for it, I saved for it, and he had no right." "Enough," Dad barked. "Don't yell at your brother. He made a mistake, and he said he's sorry. Let it go. Let it go." I was seething. My parents didn't seem to care about what I had lost, only about protecting Tom. The tension in the room grew unbearable, and then, out of nowhere, Tom staggered to his feet and slapped me across the face. I stumbled back, more shocked than hurt. "You're always so perfect," he spat. "Always judging me." My parents didn't say a word. Instead, Mom turned to me and said coldly, "Barbara, maybe you should leave. You're upsetting him." I packed a bag that night and left. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there any longer. My family, the people who were supposed to support me, had betrayed me in the worst way. It felt like I was losing everything, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I left home that night with a suitcase in one hand and my heart shattered into pieces. My own brother had sold my car, a car I worked so hard to buy, and instead of defending me, my parents sided with him. As I walked away, their words echoed in my head. Don't upset him. You can always buy another car. It wasn't just about the car, though. It was about everything that led to this moment. The years of favoritism, their constant dismissal of my efforts, and the way they enabled Tom's reckless behavior. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed somewhere to go, and the first person I thought of was my best friend, Laura. Laura had been my rock for years, the one person who always had my back. She was a lawyer, sharp and compassionate, and I knew she would understand. When I showed up at her apartment with tears streaming down my face, she didn't hesitate. "Barbara, come in," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. I told her everything, how Tom had secretly taken my car, sold it at the casino, and returned home drunk, unapologetic. I told her about the slap, the way my parents defended him, and how they had told me to leave. She listened quietly, her expression growing darker with every word. "This isn't right," she said firmly when I finished. "You've been putting up with their nonsense for too long. It's time to stand up for yourself." "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, feeling utterly lost. "You start by holding Tom accountable," she said. "He had no right to take your car, let alone sell it. You can take legal action." The thought of going to court against my own brother felt like a betrayal in itself. But hadn't they already betrayed me? My parents' favoritism, their refusal to see Tom's flaws, and their complete disregard for my feelings had left me with no other choice. Laura reassured me that I wasn't alone. "We'll do this together," she promised. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and preparation. Laura helped me file a police report for the theft of my car and drafted the legal documents to take Tom to court. It felt surreal, sitting in her office, recounting every detail of what had happened. I was nervous, but I also felt a flicker of determination. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself. When the court summons arrived at my parents' house, all hell broke loose. My phone rang incessantly, first my mom, then my dad, and finally Tom. I didn't answer any of their calls. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face them yet. Instead, I stayed with Laura, who continued to support me every step of the way. A few days later, my parents showed up at Laura's apartment. They were furious. "How could you do this to your own brother?" Mom demanded as soon as I opened the door. "How could he do this to me?" I shot back. "He stole my car, sold it, and spent the money gambling. And you're defending him." "He made a mistake," Dad said, his voice tight. "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Blowing it out of proportion?" I repeated, incredulous. "He slapped me. He kicked me out of the house. And you stood there and did nothing." Mom's face softened, but her words didn't match her expression. "Barbara, we're family. Families forgive each other. Then why haven't you forgiven me for not being Tom?" I snapped. The words came out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret them. For years, I had been holding back, pretending their favoritism didn't hurt, but I couldn't do it anymore. They left without resolving anything, and I knew that our relationship might never recover. But I also knew I couldn't back down. This wasn't just about the car. It was about all the years I had been ignored and dismissed, all the times my achievements had been overshadowed by Tom's mistakes. I deserved justice, and I was going to fight for it. The day of the court hearing came faster than I expected. I was a bundle of nerves as Laura and I walked into the courtroom. Tom was already there, looking smug and unconcerned. My parents sat beside him, glaring at me like I was the villain in this story. It hurt, seeing them choose him over me yet again, but I kept my head high. The proceedings were grueling. Laura presented the evidence, the police report, witness statements, and even security footage from the casino showing Tom arriving in my car and leaving without it. Tom tried to defend himself, claiming he was drunk and didn't know what he was doing, but the judge wasn't swayed. When the verdict was announced, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. The judge found Tom guilty of theft and financial misconduct, sentencing him to community service and mandatory counseling for his gambling addiction. He was also ordered to repay the value of my car, though I knew that would take years. After the hearing, my parents approached me one last time. "Barbara, please," Mom begged. "Drop the case. Forgive your brother. He's learned his lesson." I looked at her, then at Tom, who refused to meet my gaze. "You've spent his whole life forgiving him," I said quietly. "Maybe it's time he learns what it means to take responsibility." And with that, I walked away. It wasn't easy, turning my back on my family, but I knew it was the right thing to do. For the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter. Walking out of that courtroom was one of the hardest things I've ever done. As much as I wanted justice, part of me had still hoped for some kind of resolution, a moment where my parents or even Tom would see how much they had hurt me. But as I left, their cold stares and Tom's defiance made it clear they weren't ready to change. For years, I had lived in their shadow, their expectations, and their neglect. Now, I was determined to leave all of it behind and start fresh. Laura, my best friend and lawyer, was waiting for me outside the courthouse. "You did great in there," she said, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "I don't feel great," I admitted. My victory felt hollow. Winning the case wouldn't undo the years of hurt or magically make my family care about me. Still, it was a step forward, a way to reclaim something they had taken from me. "You'll feel better in time," Laura said. "This is just the beginning." And she was right. Over the next few weeks, I poured myself into rebuilding my life. I moved out of Laura's guest room and into a small but cozy apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. I decorated it piece by piece, choosing furniture and colors that made me feel happy and at peace. Each new addition was a small victory, a reminder that I was creating a life on my own terms. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into my job with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to keep moving forward. My boss noticed my dedication and started assigning me more challenging projects. The extra work kept my mind occupied and helped me gain confidence. I was proving to myself that I could thrive without my family's approval, and that realization was both empowering and bittersweet. During this time, Laura introduced me to someone, Jake. He was one of her friends from college, kind and easygoing in a way that made me feel instantly comfortable. At first, I was hesitant to let anyone new into my life. I was still reeling from everything that had happened with my family, and I wasn't sure I was ready to trust again. But Jake was patient, never pushing me to share more than I was comfortable with. Slowly, he became a steady presence in my life, someone who saw me for who I truly was. One evening, Jake and I were having dinner when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my mom. I hadn't heard from her since the trial, and my heart sank as I read the words. "We need to talk. Please come home." Against my better judgment, I decided to go. Part of me wanted closure, even though I knew better than to expect it. When I arrived at my parents' house, it felt like stepping into a time capsule. Everything looked the same, but it felt different, smaller, colder. My mom was waiting for me in the living room, her face lined with worry. "Barbara," she said, her voice heavy. "We miss you." I wanted to believe her, but the words felt hollow. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She hesitated before saying, "Your brother is struggling. He's been having a hard time since the trial. He's trying to turn his life around, but he needs help." I stared at her, incredulous. "You're asking me to help him? After everything he's done to me?" "He's your brother," she said, as if that explained everything. "Families are supposed to stick together." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up inside me. Families are supposed to support each other, not tear each other down. Where was this loyalty when he sold my car? When he slapped me? When you both stood by and let it happen? My dad walked in then, his expression stern. "Barbara, we don't want to fight. We just want to move past this." "Move past it," I repeated. "You mean sweep it under the rug, like you've always done with Tom's mistakes?" "No, I'm done being the one who pays for his actions." They didn't say anything after that, and I left without looking back. I felt lighter as I drove back to my apartment. For years, I had been chasing their approval, hoping they would see me for who I was. But now I realized I didn't need their validation. I had found people who valued me for me, friends like Laura and Jake who stood by me no matter what. As the weeks turned into months, my life began to stabilize. Jake and I grew closer, and I felt more at ease than I had in years. He encouraged me to pursue things I loved outside of work, like painting and hiking. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. One day, Jake surprised me with tickets to a local art exhibit. As we walked through the gallery, admiring the vibrant paintings and sculptures, I felt a sense of contentment I hadn't known before. This was my life now, a life I had built with my own strength and the support of people who truly cared about me. But just when I thought the past was behind me, it found a way to creep back in. One evening, as Jake and I were making dinner, I got another message from my mom. "We're losing the house. Please help us." I stared at the screen, torn between anger and pity. The people who had pushed me away were now asking for my help. I didn't know what to do, but one thing was certain. This wasn't over yet. The message from my mother, "We're losing the house. Please help us," stared back at me as I stood in my kitchen. Jake, sensing something was wrong, walked over and placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "What's going on?" he asked gently. I handed him my phone, and he read the message with a furrowed brow. "After everything they've done to you, they're asking for help now." His voice was calm, but I could hear the disbelief behind it. I sighed, setting my phone down on the counter. "I don't know what to do, Jake. A part of me wants to ignore them, but another part of me feels like maybe I should go. It's still my family." Jake looked at me for a moment, then said, "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But just remember, you've worked so hard to move on from the pain they caused. Don't let them pull you back into it unless you're sure it's what you want." The next day, I went to their house. It wasn't out of obligation or guilt, but because I needed closure. I had to face them one last time. Not for their sake, but for my own. When I arrived, the house looked different. Less like the home I had grown up in, and more like a shell of what it once was. The lawn was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and there was an air of neglect that mirrored the state of our family. Mom greeted me at the door, her face etched with worry. "Barbara, thank you for coming," she said, her voice soft. She led me inside, where Dad was sitting on the couch, his head in his hands. Tom was nowhere to be seen. "We didn't know who else to turn to," Mom began, wringing her hands. "The court fees, the debt from the car, and other things have piled up. We can't keep up with the mortgage payments anymore." I crossed my arms, my tone colder than I intended. "What about Tom? Shouldn't he be helping you?" Mom glanced away and Dad muttered, "He's gone." "Gone?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What do you mean, gone?" "He left," Dad said bitterly. "Packed up his things and disappeared a few weeks ago. We don't even know where he is." I felt a strange mix of anger and vindication. After everything, Tom had abandoned them, just like I knew he would. He had always relied on their unconditional support, and now, when they needed him the most, he wasn't there. I should have felt sorry for them, but all I felt was exhaustion. "And now you're asking me to fix this," I said, my voice steady. "After years of dismissing me, ignoring me, and enabling Tom, you expect me to clean up the mess he left behind?" "Barbara, please," Mom said, tears welling in her eyes. "We made mistakes, but we're still your parents. We're family." I shook my head, the weight of their words pressing down on me. "You always used family as an excuse to forgive Tom, no matter what he did. But what about me? Where was your loyalty when he sold my car? When he slapped me? When you kicked me out of the house?" They didn't have an answer, just silence. For years, I had craved their validation, their acknowledgement, but standing there in that moment, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had built a life without them, a life filled with love, respect, and peace. They had chosen Tom over me time and time again, and now they were facing the consequences of that choice. "I can't help you," I said finally, my voice firm but not unkind. "I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, but I'm done. You need to figure this out on your own." Mom sobbed quietly as I turned to leave, and Dad didn't say a word. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of relief, as though I was finally shedding the weight of their expectations and disappointments. It was painful, but it was also liberating. Back at my apartment, Jake was waiting for me. When I walked in, he pulled me into a hug. "How did it go?" he asked. "I told them no," I said, my voice steady. "They're on their own now." Jake nodded, his arms still wrapped around me. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. In the months that followed, I focused on building the life I had always dreamed of. Jake and I moved in together, and for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. I threw myself into work, earning another promotion, and picked up hobbies that brought me joy, painting, hiking, and even taking cooking classes with Jake. My apartment became a home filled with love and laughter, a far cry from the toxic environment I had left behind. As for my family, I didn't hear from them again. Occasionally, I wondered what had become of them, if they had managed to save the house, if Tom had ever come back, but those thoughts became less frequent as time went on. They were part of my past, a chapter one had closed. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset, Jake joined me, holding 2 glasses of wine. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against his. The journey hadn't been easy. It had been filled with pain, betrayal, and heartbreak. But in the end, I had found something far more valuable, myself. For the first time, I was free, and I knew I had made the right choice.